Tonight, Justice League gives us the history of the DC multiverse for like the 12th time over the New 52. I get it. Please stop. Infinity Inc. is a team that I definitely know a whole lot about and will not be BSing my way through their entire issue. And Dan Jurgens and Scott Lobdell do their very best to make Convergence not just a random cash grab and actually matter to continuity. Good luck with that. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 191 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and I'm going to try to keep things brief up top because I'm sure you can tell by the length of this episode. Oh god, it's another long one. Yes, it is not just your average Convergence week. No. We have a bunch of extra stuff we got to get done. Even more so than I thought going into this episode. Like I recorded 4 extra comics before I'm like, wait a minute. Free comic book day's a thing. Ah, crap. So let me just tell you what I got marked down on this paper and then I'll explain other stuff. So Convergence. Convergence is still a thing. We got Convergence number 4 main series. We also have tie-ins. We have Action Comics, Detective Comics, Infinity Inc., Justice Society of America, World's Finest, Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, Crime Syndicate, Plastic Man and the Freedom Fighters, and Shazam. The basic breakdown of that is Earth 2 Pre-Crisis, aka Golden Age, is the first 5 of those titles, and then a myriad of stuff from around the multiverse is the second half of those titles. So if you have any interest in any of that, be sure to check it out. I will say the Blue Beetle and the Booster Gold one are probably the most interesting. So kind of check that out if you're interested at all. On top of that, we have 4 or 5, depending on how you count, totally separate issues of things that just needed to be wrapped up before anything else could get done. So we have Batman number 40, the end of the Endgame arc. We have Superman number 40, which I guess you could technically call the end of the Geoff Johns arc. Big old asterisk on that. We have Justice League number 40, which is the beginning of Darkseid War. We have Multiversity number 2, which is the end of that series and is denser than I could possibly describe. And then the one I forgot that came out this week, because technically it didn't come out on a Wednesday, it came out on a Saturday, and that is the new free comic book day issue of Divergence, which is basically just a 3-story teaser that DC put out to say, hey, here's what we're doing after Convergence. So don't have this be your jumping off point. It's a lot. I just need to get into it. I don't really have anything else to say here. I can easily save it for next week if there is. So let's jump right on into, I'ma say, Multiversity. Multiversity number 2, written by Grant Morrison, art by Ivan Reis. So, dear Lord, we got a whole bunch to pick up on. So the last technical issue here was the Ultra issue, aka the Haunted one. This one, however, kind of just picks up right after Multiversity 1. All that stuff happened on the quote-unquote in-between, but is also happening concurrently. So we see Harbinger and the House of Heroes is being attacked by one of the big people from the Gentry. It's like a giant squid monster with like a city on its head. And we cut over to Earth 13 that is apparently currently being overrun by a police squad or something from Earth, I believe it's 43, the vampire universe. And we see that all the heroes on that Earth are bound up by some weird mystic light. And then one of the heroes starts chanting in rhyme. And they're like, oh god, he's rhyming. And it turns out that this guy is actually Etrigan, but more importantly, Etrigan the Super Demon. He's like the Superman of Earth 13, because 13's the spooky one. So they attack the guards or whatever. He frees the rest of his group, and they say, oh, there's a giant cube here that it has something to do with the vampire world, and they figure out that it has something to do with the multiverse, so they're ready to go out and take care of that. We then cut over to the Legion of Savannas, the evil Savannas from like 3 issues ago, and one of the Savannas took control of the vampire universe that I guess he was already a part of that world, and he took control of them via hypnotic powers. A few of the other Savannas are like, hey, the doorway's opening up, Earth 13's coming through, we gotta bail. And he's like, nah, my vampires will take care of this, give you guys some time, like, you guys get out of here. So the other Savannas, which is the really creepy one with the Hannibal Lecter mask and the snake one, make their escape, whereas Savannah is immediately taken out by this spooky Justice League, and their version of Zatanna casts a spell that says all vampires crave coffee instead of blood, and they start saying, I want a latte, and I guess that's the end of that. So outside we see the Marvels, Captain Marvel and all that, are attacking the giant thing that Savannah made, the orrery, but like not, and they start bashing it up to pieces. So the other Savannas now have to bail their way out to another world that I guess the Gentry is saying they need to go to. They end up on the Wild West, Earth 18, and the snake one vomits up a piece of machinery that he didn't know that he swallowed, I guess, and then both Savannas are shot dead by the Wild West crew. So that's that. We see all across the multiverse red skies, full crisis, everything's going wrong, but not like the Gentry itself, just general crises are going on, but they are unending events, as it says, on every single world. And one by one, they start getting teleported into the House of Heroes. We see literally representation from across the multiverse. And eventually Dino Cop stands up and says, hey, something's going on. It's super crazy out there. We need to fight against this thing called the Gentry. We need volunteers. We need you to be superheroes. But first things first is that, again, the House of Heroes is under attack by this giant thing called Hell Machine. It's sending out a massive army to wipe the memory of Harbinger, which at this point is just an AI powering the whole thing. So we get the Atomic Knight Batman from, I believe, Earth 17. He's got the multiversal guidebook, and he says, hey, I got this thing. It seems awfully important. And as he's saying what happened with him and Chibi Batman, where Chibi Batman ended up being a robot and they were all agents of Empty Hand, Chibi, Wonder Woman, and Steel are like, cheese it, it's the cops, they found out about us, and they're ready to fight, but then all of a sudden they have like an automatic switch that turns them off, so that, you know, they can't be tortured or turn on Empty Hand. We get a Techno Hawkman who says, oh, I can search through their AI and see what's going on. Oh, they're eyes and ears for Empty Hand. Okay, cool. Or for the Gentry, I guess he says technically. So Atomic Knight, Batman's like, okay, now can somebody tell me what I do with this comic book, the Multiverse Guidebook, please? Then we cut down to Earth 8. And this is where it picks up basically right after issue 1, is just an extended fight scene where Nixiotan, Super Judge, is undoing a Rubik's Cube. And he says, I will have this in 17 moves, and when I do, the holes in time and space will be open, and nothing can save you, the Gentry will come, and all that, blah, blah, blah. And so everyone's doing whatever they can to fight. We see all the heroes from Earth 8 that have migrated over here to Earth 7, or I might got that backwards, sorry, Earth 7 that have come over to Earth 8. No, I don't know what's happening. I think Earth 8, this was the one where the heroes were there, but then we got Thunderer from Earth 7 who survived his world's destruction. Captain Carrot says that his powers are about to run out. He needs to eat another cosmic carrot or else he'll turn back into a normal anthropomorphic bunny. We see a bunch of the other heroes going down, and everyone's just basically trying to hold their own, going up against Nyx as best they can. Eventually, Stubbs the monkey comes up to Captain Carrot after he gets decapitated, but it's in a cartoonish way, so technically he's fine. And Stubbs is basically like, look, Super Judge had a plan for all of this. He was already all these steps ahead. He knew that the Gentry would want the door to be opened, but the door goes both ways, and he's already planned all that out. But we got to get on his level. We got to catch up with what he needs. Meanwhile, Aquawoman of Earth 11 talks to Thunderer and says, hey, I need water. Give me what you can. And so she gets watered, and then she's apparently the most powerful entity from Earth 11, so she zaps Super Judge and then stabs him in the eye with her trident, and he's like, yeah, that'll change your tune. So Stubbs and them are trying to look for the transmatter cubes, because those are apparently the keys to the universe. Meanwhile, Harbinger is up top, just like, oh, my memory's being deleted, and Atomic Knight just holds up the comic book in front of Harbinger's face and says, oh, okay, I get it now. Thanks for showing me that map. And they manage to fight off the Harbinger, which then, or not Harbinger, Hellbringer or whatever, and he gets thrown into some sort of monster that lives in the bleed, and it's taken out. So Captain Thunder and all them are also there. Captain Carrot gets his body back. He eats the carrot and is just like, okay, cool, so what's the plan? And Stubbs holds up basically the script saying, here, the comics, like, this is what it's all about. Everything he knows in here. Red Racer shows up. At least I think this one's Red Racer. He comes up and says, hey, I need you. Like, you are able to read these comic books faster than anyone else. You can make the connections that we need to. And so it's super speed. He reads through the comics and he says, oh, wow, okay, this was happening all over the multiverse. I gotta go get help. SOS is apparently the code word to open up these transmatter cubes. That's the key. If you say SOS, it opens up the door. So he runs at 6 times the circumference of the Earth every second. He escapes dimensional velocity, and he yells SOS just as Super Judge finishes undoing the Rubik's Cube, apparently 2 or 3 moves faster than he theoretically should have been able to. So the transmatter cube opens up, but because it was the plan that the door opens from both sides, Red Racer has an entire Flash army that he's managed to get in just those few seconds, and they deliver a massive infinite mass punch, combining all of them into Super Judge's face. So the army decays, Super Judge goes down. Turns out this giant-sized version of him was just like a cage that he was kept inside of, but his eye is still bleeding. And they say, yeah, okay, the transmatter doorway thing, the Rubik's Cube, it is also one. We got to take care of that. But first things first, the big monsters from the Gentry, not just these smaller ones they've been fighting against, the big ones show up, and they're like, hey, all right, you beat our things or whatever, and you Super Judge may have escaped, but like, we're still going to win. And he's like, oh, God, what have I done? I knelt before them. I was helping them. And Superman at this point from Earth 23, I believe, he's like, hey, you know, you also assembled this massive army of all these superheroes. This is definitely a win in our column. So back on the base, Harbinger's telling everybody, yo, we got to go to Earth 8 now. Anyone who's up for it, let's go. So they all leap through the portal, get brought up to speed, and as the Gentry is about to attack, and we see that the people are bracing for their like last breaths here, the small amount that were there, the portals open up, they all come blasting out, and we have the Captain America from Earth 7 called Crusader go Retaliator's Rampage. It's literally the scene from Endgame. So yeah, they managed to take out the Gentry, as far as we could tell. They're all completely out. And Superman realizes that there is a door that's giving out a signal from Earth 7. And they're like, well, we got to see that it was our whole thing to be able to get back over to Earth 7. Let's go ahead. Let's go through the door. As they step through, they see Earth 7 is in ruins. Thunderer is super upset by that, but they see on the horizon a massive throne made out of the ruins of a city, and sitting on it is the being known as Empty Hand, surrounded by a bunch of other Gentry creatures. And he's like, all right, I've seen all I need to see. You're not worth my time. And they're like, well, we just beat your thing. What are you building here? What's your army doing? He's like, oh, my army's building the Oblivion Machine. It will be the final chapter in your never-ending story. And it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll beat you. We'll always beat you. And he's like, nah, I've already taken out Multiverse 2. I've already destroyed an entire multiverse. You will come next, and it will be at a time of my choosing. Goodbye. And then he says, empty is my hand. And then all of a sudden, the heroes just wake up on Earth 8. And so we cut back into the House of Heroes, And Superman's basically like, well, that's a big threat. We're going to need to build a team to deal with that. Volunteers from all 50 Earths, you are more than welcome. And he goes with Captain Carrot down into what I can only assume is a vault, along with the haunted comic book of Ultra Comics. And he says, well, apparently the source of all our problems is Earth 33, aka real-life reality. And they are swearing that they're going to figure out what's going on, and the superheroes are coming to get them. So they've launched Operation Justice Incarnate. That's their new team. And we see everyone gathered around, thanking Superjudge for everything he did, being able to save the multiverse. And he's like, yeah, no, it's no big deal. And they're like, no, seriously, how do we thank you? What can we do for someone as omnipotent as you? And he's like, I have an idea. And so we cut back to Earth Zero, where he's waking up in his apartment. Stubbs is just a stuffed little animal monkey. He apparently fell asleep reading comic books. His landlord's like coming in because he owes $800 in rent, and he's like, oh yeah, here, check it out, $800 from friends. And yeah, that's Multiversity. I get it. I think I get it. I probably don't get it, but I feel like I do. And I like the concepts being played with here overall. I do think that this issue was a little bit bloated just in terms of, like, the fight scenes, strangely enough. Like, if you want to go full on, we're doing this meta-narrative on the idea of what he literally calls gentrification of comics, and this idea of the empty hand representing when people stop reading comics, and that will truly be the end of comics as a whole. Like, I get the meta-narrative, but I just, like, the fight scenes bloated out just a little bit too long. And I understand that's kind of necessary for the story you're telling, because fight scenes are the reason that people's reading. So, I don't know. Somewhere along the way, this probably needed to be like 3 issues instead of 2, but it's not the way it worked out. So, I think this is a great series overall. I don't think you need to read every single one of the tie-ins. I think you could probably get away with issue 1 and 2 of the 2 border ones, the Multiversity Guidebook, and Ultra Comics. I think that's really all you absolutely need here. But it's been a great read, beginning to end, and I know that nothing ever comes out of this in terms of like paying off the empty hand thing, at least not yet. So when someone gets around to that, we'll see. But for now, it's a very solid issue. Justice League number 40, written by Geoff Johns, art by like 700 different people, because it's the beginning of Darkseid War, everybody. It's part 1, I believe, officially. No, actually, it's a prologue. My mistake. So, this opens up with just an explanation of the DC universe. There was a world, and we're hearing all this monologue through Metron, and it's basically saying there was a world, and then it died, and then it lived, and then it died, and it's done this like several hundred dozen times or whatever. It keeps happening, and it's not something that is all that remarkable. However, it does need to stop, and we see after the Amazovirus stuff happens, we've got a man named Wilson Morgan who can control like electricity. He found out that his neighbor's kid got kidnapped, and so he's managed to track it down on her phone as to where she is. He's on the phone with the neighbor, says, yeah, call the police, tell them the location, I'm going in to get her. And he blasts down the door with electricity, and then he gets shot in the chest. And he just starts bleeding out as the kidnapper and the kid get away. And as he looks up at the sky, he says, are you an angel? Because in the moments before his death, apparently that's when you're able to see the new gods. And Metron's sitting in his chair like, pshaw, no, I'm not, screw you. And he basically says, like, yes, I am the keeper of all knowledge, blah, blah, blah. I watch things, I see things, and I keep things going like that. But I've sat on this chair for so long because I have made the solemn vow not to interfere, not to give either side or do anything with my knowledge. However, if the universe were to end and not be reborn, I would be left watching nothing. And I don't like that idea. So I do tip the scales in favor of having something at the very least. And he says how back during the wars between New Genesis and Apocalypse, Darkseid and Highfather, every once in a while their orbits would bring them real close together, and they'd fight it out, and the tolls would be super heavy, and eventually Metron was like, hey, Darkseid, I want to broker a deal. No more war between you and Highfather, and I need you guys to trade sons. And Darkseid goes, why would that stop me? I would not care less about doing that. And he's like, fair enough, but Highfather would. He would view that as a truce, and he would stop attacking you. And apparently Darkseid may have smiled in that moment, but he basically agrees. And then Metron goes over to Highfather and says, hey, Darkseid's already agreed. The only way to stop the war is if you give up your kid. And he's like, I couldn't possibly do that, but ending the war... However, off down in the hallway, we see a young Scott-Free, who's just Scott in this, is saying... oh God, I can't believe it. And then he runs away, but his dad catches him. He's like, please, Dad, don't send me. And Metron, he straight up lies to Highfather and says, it's the only way to end the war. And Highfather does it. So we see the exchange of the two sons. And as they cross this desert or whatever where it's happening, Orion looks at Scott and is like, oh my God, are you crying? Jesus, you're not going to last 5 seconds over there. Meanwhile, I'm going to destroy New Genesis from within because I'm the son of Darkseid. Yeah. So yeah, Scott lived in torture and all that sort of stuff, and eventually Metron just didn't care. However, Crisis on Infinite Earths happened. And he wasn't prepared for it. I guess he was just watching something happen elsewhere, and then all of a sudden, everything got wiped out, and then came back again, now as a single universe. And he's like, what the hell was that? And he looks over and he sees Crisis happening, the whole big splash page of them fighting against the Anti-Monitor. And he's just like, oh, all right, cool. But then he saw 0 Hour happen, where time was remade again. And then he saw Infinite Crisis happen, where the multiverse was made again. And then he saw Flashpoint happen. And frankly, he doesn't know what happened there, but time was all messed up. And he's like, now we're in another universe, and it's barely even begun to cool off, and we're already facing down another crisis. The universe can't handle that. If we have another crisis right now, it's going to break everything. So he says, I have to go talk to the guy who is going to be the cause of this, who might end up causing these problems. He recently, after Forever Evil, showed up on Earth 3. You love him, you hate him. It's the Anti-Monitor. And so he comes up and says, but I knew you by your name beforehand. So, hello, Mobius. This is important because he sits on the Mobius chair. And Anti-Monitor then just turns around and just says, like, don't talk to me, Metron, I hate you. And he's like, okay, well, funny story. And then, like, Anti-Monitor zaps him, and he's like, well, you know you can't zap me when I'm sitting on your chair. He's like, yeah, but I like it. I like trying to do it. So, long story short, Metron basically is saying, hey, the universe can't handle another crisis. We can't do that sort of thing. I need you to not destroy everything. And he's like, it's what I gotta do, though. Like, I gotta destroy things. It's my curse. It is my penance. And Metron points out that Convergence is going on right now, and he's like, yo, Brainiac's messing with timelines, too. And Anti-Monitor literally says, that doesn't matter. He's not going to do anything important. You can ignore Convergence. And Metron doesn't argue. And he's just like, all right, look, I have the ability, or I believe I can at the very least, to get you out of your curse and your penance and put you back into the way you were. And Anti-Monitor is like, no, you don't. You can't do that. However, I know someone who does have the power to do that, and I will escape my ability to be a destroyer if I go ahead and fight him. And Metron's like, bro, if you go out and fight Darkseid, you are not going to like the end result. And he's like, oh yeah, I do want a war with Darkseid. That's my entire goal here. Darkseid's death is going to be the key of everything. And he ends up actually successfully zapping Metron. He falls out of the chair, and he says, the age of the new gods is about to end. The age of the anti-god will now begin. And we see this mystery hooded figure, the same girl from before, who says, yes, Mobius, death to my father. Daughter of Darkseid says death to Darkseid. Okay. Fine. Good. Okay. It's just a prologue. It doesn't really do anything except say, yes, this event that you know is Darkseid War is going to be a war between Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor. Like, that's what it's going to be. And that's fine. That is a perfectly fine setup. It's just that this issue is like 20 pages to get to that. And as someone who is mildly, if not moderately, if not extremely familiar with the DC continuity of Crisis and Rebirths and stuff like that, the first like 20 pages of this are whatever. Like, you know it. You know Crisis on Infinite Earths happened. You know that there was 0 Hour. You know that there was Infinite Crisis. You know all of this stuff happened. So hearing someone else recap it is basically just saying, like, this time it's really, really, really important. Those other times were just really, really important, but this time it's doubly so. And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about that. Art throughout the issue is fine. I really don't have any problems with it. I didn't feel the change in artists, but apparently there were like 50 of them. So yeah, I think this one is probably going to be just I'm going to say 7 for me. It's good. It definitely cracks the good mark, but I don't think that this is something that gets me more excited for the event than I would have already have been. This is just kind of yeah, we already knew they were going to fight. What else are you bringing to the table? Batman number 40, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. So this is the final part of Endgame. In the previous issue, we had Batman getting a whole group of the villains together so they could go out and fight against Joker. This issue picks up basically at the same point. We see him reminiscing over the day that the Red Hood, one member of the gang or whatever, fell into the acid, which obviously is the accepted origin story for the Joker here. And he's like, I remember how it began so often, and whenever I think about it, I figure it always has to come to this. And we see the fight scene with all the Bat family and the villains up against the Joker zombies. They're doing their best to push their way towards Joker, but they keep on getting swarmed. Eventually, Poison Ivy sets up a big wall of roots around them so they can just take a minute to figure out what to do. Batman then tells Bane, hey, basically fastball special, throw me up there. So Bane catapults Batman up over to Joker, who is at this point on a parade float on the giant T-Rex from the Batcave, and he just barely doesn't make it. He's holding onto the bottom jaw of the T-Rex, and Joker pulls out a chainsaw and says, no cutting in, because at that point he's dancing with what I believe is the skeleton of Martha Wayne? Maybe? So eventually Batman pulls himself up, Joker goes chasing with the chainsaw, and he gets Joker in a headlock and is ready to extract the fluid from his spine, and Joker says, and he activates this super high-pitched, super loud volume, like screech, maybe laughter as far as I can tell, and it basically knocks him down to his knees. There's nothing you can do about it. Simultaneously, everybody is wearing gas masks to keep themselves safe from the Joker toxin, and I guess it's loud enough to shatter all of their masks, like all of the family. So Joker says, all right, time for the final bit, and he undoes his sleeves and sends out a whole bunch of death toxin into the air. And he's like, nothing funny about this stuff. It's just poison gas. So they're all inhaling it because obviously that's a thing. And as Joker's like, all right, breathe deep, this is it. And Batman says, no, not yet. And he seemingly passes out. And Joker goes, wait, hold on, I almost forgot. And he pulls Batman up and he pulls out his phone and says, you were trying to get the stuff out of my spine to make a cure for all the Joker zombies, but joke's on you, I already diluted it. You wouldn't be able to make a cure out of it. No. You see, the only cure in all of Gotham is in this cave that I've got a camera pointed to, and explosives are wired all around it. And if you knew your city any better, you would have been able to have found it. And that's the only place where you can get the fluid. But now I'm gonna set off the bombs, and it's going to explode that cave. Isn't that right, Bruce? And he pulls off the massive Batman, wanting him to see him fail for the final time. And it's Dick Grayson. And he says, wait a minute, you're here. And he's like, I think the word you're looking for is dick. And so Joker casts him aside. He tries launching the explosives, but nothing's happening. Cut to the system of caves or whatever. Batman's descending down into it. Julia's up at the top with like the rope, lowering him down. And it's like, look, I've run interference on the bombs, but it's not going to last forever. There's no contingency here. You got to find this pool of liquid now. And Batman says, yes, I switched places with Dick. It was the only way he wouldn't have set off this bomb early. If he didn't see a Batman in the fight, he would have known I would have thought about the caves. And he figured the only way to get to it was A, when he saw the map of Gotham the Court of Owls had, there was a mining operation somewhere around this area. And also, when Death of the Family happened, Joker went over the falls and probably found this place. So he sent a bunch of little like drone things over the edge to follow the current as well and see where they ended up. And he finally does get to one. He finds the explosives to the Joker stuff. He's like, I gotta be close. And he comes across this big green pool of Dionysium. And he's like, oh, sweet, Julia, I found it. Hold on, scooping it up now. Do you get the readings? And Julia's like, yep, we got it. We can make a cure. You just got to send up a sample, and we'll be right on it. And so he starts loading it up. But then all of a sudden, little PA system kicks over the explosives, and Julia's like, oh, you got to get out of there now. The explosives are coming off. And all of a sudden, the cave starts exploding. Batman, he gets enough of a sample. He starts running towards the exit. And before he can make it there, Joker comes in, slashes Batman in the shoulder, and he's like, oh, all right, Julia, look, he's going to follow me up. He's going to ruin everything. You got to take up the sample without me attached to it. And she's like, no, just bucket yourself in. I'll pull you up. And he's like, nope, not going to happen. I've got more to do down here. So we get a fight scene between Batman and Joker. And Joker's apparently moving faster than Batman has ever seen him move before. And he's like, is this new? Is this the thing he was always able to do? Was he always just going slower with me? We see Joker manages to stab 2 knives into his shoulder blades and slash him in a big smile down the low of his back. So it's like, haha, see, it's time to think of all the great times we've had. Go ahead and smile. So Batman tackles him as the cave continues to cave in. Batman gets smashed in the head with a flaming rock. Batman punches Joker in the face like repeatedly to the point where he's just bleeding profusely. And it's horrific looking, but Batman's basically like, hey, if you're thinking that you're going to be able to crawl over to that hole and heal yourself up, I just laced my fists and the batarangs and stuff like that with an immune blocker that's going to make it so that you can't get healed from there. However, if you are actually immortal, as you claim to be throughout this book, then it shouldn't be a problem because the immune blocker wouldn't have any effect on that potent of a strain. So what do you say? Want to lay your cards on the table? And Joker throws out some playing cards that are all blades. And he's like, yes, of course. So Batman gets hit pretty bad, including one in the eye. He bites Joker's ears off. Like, it's just a full knockout, drag out fight here until eventually Batman is pretty much down for the count. He's losing too much blood. Joker manages to get on top of him. And he's like, yep, I'm always laughing because it's so meaningless, blah, blah, blah. And he just says the same stuff he always does. And he pulls out a knife and he's about to stab it into Batman's face. And Batman stops him and he says, like, oh, it's not over yet. And he manages to push Joker in the way of a falling stalagmite. And it hits him in the back and essentially paralyzes him from the waist down. Meanwhile, the pool is starting to get more and more corrosive, I guess, whatever you want to call it, more excited by all the action going on. And so Joker's like, oh, crap, I got to get to that pool. And so he starts crawling his way over. Batman grabs hold of him around the neck and says, hey, Joker, I want you to know I believe you now. I'm going to hold you in place here, though, until you accept my apology. I believe that you're the Pale Man, and you don't need that pool. You're a strong, independent Pale Man. You don't need no pool to survive. And Joker's like, hey, let go of me, man. I don't want to hear any of this. And Batman's like, no, come on, Joker. You got to forgive me. Forgive me for not believing that you are an immortal. And Joker's like, fine, I forgive you. Whatever. Just let me get to the pool. And on cue, giant-ass boulder comes down from the roof, blocks the entirety of the pool, and Joker's like, oh God, you've just killed us both. Well, I can't believe this. Like, I destroyed everything that you love up in Gotham. All of your Bat family is dead. And he's like, not quite. See, I gave them a little bit of a tincture from Crazy Quilt's lab. It's not enough to be a full cure, but it's enough to keep them alive, so they'll be fine. And so they're both just laying there bleeding out. And Julia pops over saying, hey man, you're bleeding out. Can you get to like the rope? Like, can you do that? And he's like, no, I'm going to stay down here. And she's like, look, just get like a tiny bit of the Dionysium and you'll be fine. Like, take the sample back. I haven't fully pulled it up yet. Take it and you'll be fine. He's like, it would make the sample worthless. You got to take it up. Go. I'm going to lay here with my friend for a while. So we cut to 2 weeks later. There's a whole bunch of bat signals up out in the sky. Julia's looking up at them from her dad's bedside, and Alfred is just like, close the curtains. I don't want to see that. And she's like, oh, you need some light. And Alfred's like, he's really gone, isn't he? I keep on thinking I'm going to wake up and it's going to be some dream or whatever. And he's like, yeah, he's gone. Also, Dad, should we put your hand back on? Because, like, you lost a hand in this event, and, you know, we got some pretty crazy stuff in the DC universe. You want your hand back? And he's like, no, I have no reason to use it anymore. So Julia reveals, hey, look, I don't get it. Like, Batman has all of these super things and, like, all of these things that could, like, bring people back to life, and yet he just went in basically raw. Like, he didn't have anything protecting him, and also he left a note. What the hell does it mean? And Alfred reads the note reluctantly, and he's like, I get it. It's him saying that he's flawed. And we get this whole thing of Gotham rebuilding, showing all this stuff. If you remember back in the first issue of this arc, there was a thing of the Deus Ex Machina, this armor that descends in a theater, and it was funded by Wein and blah, blah, blah. We see the theater itself is in ruins, and the armor's in the trash, and we get Alfred basically saying Batman at its end is a tragedy, and the reason he always went in raw is because he could easily be immortal, but he knows that he has to be down here with us. He has to be able to face death and smile into the void, and so that's why his final note that was written to us is just a single word, ha, and that's the issue. I don't think I really like the Endgame arc. It's not that it's, like, bad by any means. I just think that, if I'm being honest, I think that this probably was intended to be, like, up to issue 44 or 45. Like, I think this meant to be, like, a really long and winding arc where we, like, go through a bunch of different things. But, like, as he was starting it, as he got to, like, issue 2, it came down of, like, we're doing shakeups at issue 40, wrap everything up by that point. And he's like, oh, all right, well, I'll strip it down to, is Joker immortal? And also he launches his biggest attack. But even the biggest attack feels like, what, 2 days in Gotham? It feels like it's practically done with. And even the Justice League stuff, where it's like, oh, the Justice League has been Jokerized. That's, like, not even mentioned again after the fact, except to say they're off the board. So, like, it's not a horrible arc. I just feel like it could have been so much more than what it ended up being. So I don't know. It's a little bit hit or miss for me. And this final issue, I think, doesn't do anything that I didn't already feel was done with Death of the Family. That's kind of like where I feel we're still at that point. We haven't developed past there. So yeah, it's okay. I think I'm probably going to give this one, just by sheer art, and I recognize the talent and the writing, even if I'm not entirely a fan of it. I'm going to say this one is a 7.5, but, like, it's just missing that little extra something to push it over into, like, this is one of the all-time greatest Batman. Like, it's okay. It's fine. It's just not great. Superman number 40, written and art by John Romita Jr. I thought for sure this was the end of the Geoff Johns arc in Superman, but no, turns out John Romita Jr. took over one single issue while still doing the art, and yeah, we get that from this. So we have Superman out in the middle of Mongolia, miles from anywhere, and he does another solar flare up on top of a mountain. And we see him powerless, and he's just, like, breathing heavy and all that. And in comes a Batjet who's like, hey, man, I'm not going to keep picking you up. Also, you're naked. Get in here, put on some clothes, and then I'll bring you back to, reality, back to society. And we see, I guess, 24 hours have passed. and we're up at the Justice League satellite. And Batman's like, all right, we got the whole Justice League here, Clark, because we need to talk to you. First off, I'm not your taxi service. Stop doing this. And mind you, all of this stuff he's saying is said with a smile and a grin. Like, he's best buds with Superman. And he's like, seriously, I'm not going to pick you up as a taxi service. And he's like, I know, look, I don't know quite how to activate my solar flare power yet. It's like something I'm still figuring out here, and I want this meeting in order to help, like, what's going on here. I need your guys' help. And look, I'm just going to be upfront with you. They do this thing in this issue where Clark repeatedly is doing the whole alien who doesn't understand human stuff. Like, it's baffling that they're doing this with Clark of all people. But he says, oh yeah, you know, after a few times of doing this, I get 24 hours of being human. And like, boy, I got to tell you, I really love the food. And he's like, what, the food? That's the thing? He's like, oh yes, you know, I like the other human stuff as well. And Wonder Woman chimes in just like, okay, look, I get your thing of wanting to do this, but are you sure that, like, every time you do this flare, you're actually coming back up to 100% afterwards? What if it's, like, degrading your powers more and more over time? And he says something about, like, oh yeah, my flying power is limited to jumps, and that seems indefinite. And they're like, that seems like a big deal. So Cyborg eventually chimes in and says, oh yes, I've got a test just for this, you know, JL 1-1A. And Superman's like, what the hell is JL 1-1A? Cut to 45 minutes later, they're just blasting him with rocket launchers and guns and just going full nuts to test his invulnerability and endurance. And Superman's like, I get it, there is no test, you guys are just pulling one on me. And then Wonder Woman comes up and punches him in the face, and it hits him, but ultimately, she agrees, yeah, no, he felt like a block of concrete even to me. He's back to invulnerable, his powers are full up, and Flash is like, all right, let's test his reflexes. And he just drops like a 3,000-ton weight on Superman, and it looks like it crushes him, but then it's apparent that he dodged behind it, and he's like, this is the rec room, but more like the rec room, you know, like with a W and a K at the end, and it's just like, yeah, we get it, okay, your humor's back to nothing. And so Cyborg's like, all right, look, the only way we're actually going to be able to test your solar flare abilities, if you do it in the Watchtower with us paying attention, I can take all of the excess energy that's going off and funnel it into our exhaust systems and our solar cells. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to solve the energy crisis of the world based off of how we can actually take in your energy and whatnot. So they're all standing by and watching. And they're like, all right, go for it. And he's like, all right. And so he lets loose the heat vision and then slowly expands out until eventually he does the solar flare again. And it's immediately apparent that whatever test room they had, however safe they thought they were, it was not enough, as we see an explosion on the bottom half of the Watchtower. It's not played for thrills. They're just like, oh, geez, that was insane. So Batman runs out to a naked Clark, and like, Flash is covering up Wonder Woman's eyes despite the fact that they're sleeping together, and she's like, let me see, get that out of my hands. And Batman's like, hey man, do you feel you have a better grasp on the trigger now? He's like, kinda. It's like I start to scream, but I never actually do. And Batman's like, okay, I need to ask you a very important question, Clark. Are you hungry? Do you want some dinner? And then we cut down to a bar in Metropolis where the entirety of the Justice League, except for Cyborg, because screw him, I guess, are all out at the bar and they're enjoying beers together. And Cyborg says, hey, I think I'm onto something. We can adjust the batteries to be able to absorb more, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole thing. And Superman's like, hey, that's great, cool. We'll talk about it tomorrow, Cyborg. And he hangs up and he's like, guys, I like beer. Beer is really good. I like all these alcoholic drinks you people have. And also, I would like those mini Italian desserts, the cannolis. And they're like, cannolis? It's like, yes, cannolis. Let's go get cannolis. And so he drinks some more, and everyone's like, has he ever been drunk before? Has he ever done this? It's like, nah, never as a human. And so he just has zero tolerance for it. He passes out after like a quarter of a beer. And he's out for the night. Next morning comes, we see that there is an attack on a Lex Tech building. Some guys with guns are going around firing stuff. Clark wakes up. He's got a hangover. He's like, oh, God, there's an attack. I got to go deal with that. And we see him taking a full 5 minutes to get ready into his Superman outfit. He's swallowing the mouthwash, and he's like, I hope that's not going to mess with my stomach more, because, geez, I feel like I need to barf. He jumps out the window, realizes that he can't fly, but he does have enough invulnerability to stay okay, and then he starts leaping in single bounds across the city. He gets over to the guys who have super advanced technology. They don't say exactly where it came from, but they are being paid to attack this LexCorp building. And so as they are firing and then filling up their backpacks with energy from the building, Superman comes in. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to test out these weapons on Superman. And Superman, not knowing if he's invulnerable at this point, dodges out of the way. He doesn't want to get hit here. However, the building starts to come down around him. And so he gets trapped underneath the rubble. And the guys are like, oh yeah, we just took out Superman. To which then one of the guys says, oh, wait, I hear sirens. Cops are showing. Bro, you just took out Superman, and you're worried about the cops. But they're like, yeah, no, screw that, man. We just took down Superman. But then they feel the rubble beneath them shaking, as Superman does have enough strength to push the rubble off of him and come out. They start firing again. He blocks it with a big steel beam, which I guess reflects it back at them. The art's very unclear, but they're out of the fight. And Superman's like, I don't know if my head hurts from having a building dropped on it or a hangover, but I'm never doing that again. And then his crowds start to gather around Superman, which is bleeding from his forehead. He goes around, grabs all the weapons, says, I need to let Cyborg and Batman take a look at these, see where they came from. And then he leaps out of the scene as a bunch of photos are being taken of him. And we see the next day or later on that day, photos are being reported on the news saying like, oh, it's unprecedented. People are able to get photos this clear of Superman and he's jumping away. Who knew he jumped whenever he flew? It's crazy. And also, here's a close-up picture of his face bleeding. And we see Lois looking at the screen and she's like, wait a minute, Clark? And then at that exact moment, Clark Kent's walking by in sunglasses with a bandage right where Superman was bleeding. And she goes, Clark? And then like she looks to herself and goes, Clark? And that's the issue. It was a weird tone. I guess that's my biggest issue with it, is that like Superman is being played the same way that I would imagine like an early days Martian Manhunter would be, or like Wonder Woman. That's a better comparison. Wonder Woman, of just like, what is this ice cream and how does one eat it? Like, dude, this could, even if he doesn't know the effects of beer, like he's treating it like, what is this fair fine liquid that you have here, strange people? Like, he's Clark Kent. He knows what this is. He grew up in Kansas. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a really weird tone there. And then also there was this weird, like, playfulness from the rest of the league. And I'm not saying that that's not allowed, but especially from Batman, who is, like, cracking jokes constantly. I don't understand the characterization in this issue. And on top of it, John Romita Jr. art is usually not for me, and this is no change in that. So, yeah, it's more misses than it is hits. I really don't know what to make of this. And honestly, it feels like kind of a nothing issue to begin with. It just feels like, oh yeah, Solar, let's just explore that for an issue, and then we'll get back on with the story. So I'm going to say this is I can't go higher than a 6, if I'm being honest. It's not offensively bad, it's just so weird. So yeah, 6. Divergence #1, written by a bunch of people because this is the free comic book day issue for 2015, and it is essentially a glorified teaser of things that will be coming up soon, but they are all original stories, so I guess it's worth talking about. So this is 3 different things. We got Batman, Superman, and Justice League, each by the teams that will be covering them, and it's basically saying what's coming up after Convergence. So we open up with Batman. This is The Rookie by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. It opens up with them just talking like, the bat signal, you when you see it, you know that help is on the way, and they even managed to work in a na-na-na-na-na-na-na joke. But they say that, yeah, it's been 2 months since Batman theoretically died in Endgame, and Batman's not coming, and all of Gotham is sending up bat signals in the sky, and they're just kind of mourning the loss of him. And we have a newscaster that's basically saying, well, at the very least, he died and took Joker with him, because, like, that counts for something, right? And we get an interview with a woman named Jerry Powers, and apparently she is saying, like, yes, Batman was an inspiration, blah, 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 but Gotham needs a Batman, and we are going to honor him in a new way. We've been working with military, with police, with all this stuff, and we're starting something new. And we see her turn off the TV, and she speaks to this mystery figure who's not that impressed by what's going on, and he's smoking a cigarette, and she's like, hey, if you're gonna do this, you can't be smoking. That needs to be your last one. He was like, it's definitely my last one. Totally, absolutely. So this mystery figure goes walking down a hallway. We see the mayor and a few other, like, higher ups are, like, taking pictures, like, sneakily or whatnot, but they're also, like, smirking and laughing and whatnot. And I don't want to bury the lead too much. It's literally just one page later where it's like, all right, if you're going to do this, you got to want it. You got to want it bad. So tell me, are you ready to be Batman? Commissioner Gordon. And we see that it's Gordon. He shaved off the mustache. He's got a weird hairstyle. It's a mohawk, but he says that it's a military cut. And we see him get into a giant robot bat suit, which everyone calls the bunny suit, even though it's technically called the rookie suit. And he says, yep, I'm not ready at all to be Batman. This is quite literally the dumbest idea in the history of Gotham City. So when do I get my Batmobile? So that's that story. I'd say it's fun enough. It is barely worth rating. It's probably just like 7. It's okay. Next we get the Superman story written by Gene Luen Yang, art by John Romita Jr. It's called Exposed. And we get Superman and Jimmy sitting outside a food truck somewhere in Metropolis. He's like got full hood up, hiding himself, doing what I can. Then he looks over and sees this big, strong, tough guy who makes eye contact with him. And Clark's like, hey, Jimmy, don't look now, but I think somebody's got an eye out for us. And the implication here is that Clark is trying to hide for whatever reason. But this big tough guy comes over and he's like, hey, you're Clark Kent, aren't you? And he's like, no. And Jimmy makes up a line of like, this is Horace man. And so the big tough guy walks away and Superman's like, Clark's like, that's the dumbest name I've ever heard in my life. And he's like, I panicked. What? So the big tough guy walks over to the food truck and says, all right, you and your ugly ass wife get out of this truck. I need it. And so he just picks up the truck as the people jump out and he throws it over saying, hey, Horace, catch. And Clark pushes people out of the way, grabs the truck, and like throws it on its way, continuing the momentum. And we see the guy's taking off his sweatshirt. He's got some big glowing, what seem to be snake tattoos. And he's like, I knew it. You are Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman. Do you recognize me? And Superman's like, no. Who are you? And he's like, oh, you put me away a few years before I got my powers. You humiliated me like a chump, and now I'm gonna get the respect you owe me. And he picks Clark up by his neck, and Clark just boxes the guy's ears, and he goes down. It's just the shortest fight possible. So a crowd is gathered, all cameras are on Clark, and he's like, oh God, I gotta get out of here. And so he jumps away. And we get a page that basically is Twitter/news reports saying like, oh, Superman was spotted, blah, blah, blah. Superman/Clark Kent. And we see some of the people are like, oh my God, he's so hot. But a lot of people are like, alien freak, how dare he lie to us for all those years? Get out of here. And the final news report is saying Superman, aka Clark Kent, was seen down in this neighborhood of Metropolis. He is kept out of the limelight ever since Lois Lane exposed his secret identity to the world. And we cut to a motel where Lois is knocking on the door. Clark answers. He's like, great. If you can find me, then anyone can. And she's like, nah, I have my ways specific to me. Anyway, do you need some cash? It seems like you need some cash. And he's like, no, I don't need cash, Lois. What do you want? And she's like, look, I'm sorry. What I did, I'm worried about you. I had no right and I'm sorry. And he's like, no, you didn't. Bye. And he closes the door on her. And that's the issue. Art-wise, it's kind of iffy in places for me, but I think writing-wise, I'm interested to see how the hell did we get here. So I'll give that a 7.5. And then the final story is the second prologue to the Dark Side War, titled The Other Amazon, written by Geoff Johns, art by Jason Fabok. And we open up on Themyscira, where it's a dark and stormy night, and Hippolyta is giving birth to Diana. And narration is saying like, yeah, they came up with the whole story about made out of clay and whatever else, but like, this was how it actually happened that night. But that wasn't the only Amazon to give birth that night. And we cut to a cave on the side of a cliff where we're introduced to Marina, who is a Themyscirian assassin. And she's helped by a woman named Penelope and this other woman there who we'll get to in a minute. But she gives birth, and as she gives birth, the other women like retract in horror because the baby comes out with gray skin and glowing red eyes. Very clearly Darkseid's kid. And at that moment, the other woman named Penelope starts basically having a seizure. She is an oracle. She has visions of the future, and she's like, I can't see past the birth of this child with my future vision. So I wanted to come along to see what happened. And so all of a sudden she starts having a vision. She's like, oh God, I can see again the daughter of a dark god. One day she will start a war. I see it. And we see Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor fighting against each other. And we see a whole bunch of stuff that's going to happen. It says Green Lantern will make a horrific sacrifice. A new god will be born, as it says Batman. Hope is lost as Lex Luthor is holding Superman's cape. Aquaman is drowning. Cyborg and Shazam are on their last legs. Mr. Miracle is in a tight spot, and Wonder Woman's going up and fighting against a bunch of parademons. And that's when they hold on. It's just like, and there's Hippolyta's daughter, and Amazon is fighting in the middle of all this, and says like, oh, she will suffer. All of them will suffer. There will be a great darkness. And so the other Amazon is just like, all right, we got to kill the baby. And Marina says, no, that's my child. I won't let you hurt her. It's like, no, that's a dark god child. It has to be killed. And Penelope's just going on about like, oh, that's the end of everything. Everything sucks. It's all happening. So Marina fights against what's-her-face, kicks her off the edge of the cliff. Penelope's just casting out names. Diana, Bruce, Hal Scott, all of them will be hurt. Penelope, that's her name. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, Penelope, but you're not part of my plan. And she basically says, the Vision Seeker, as she starts bleeding out of her nose and all that, says, this universe will die and the anti-god will be reborn. And we see Superman shouting out the name Mobius as he's reaching for something. And then we get a glimpse of Darkseid's daughter, fully grown. Her name will be Grail. And this is now Marina talking as she throws the body of Penelope off the side of the cliff. And she says, oh, on my way down to the water, I saw Hippolyta giving birth, but she did not see me. I put the two bodies on a boat that then crashed into the shore. She would have assumed that all three of us died there, but I actually was the first Amazon to ever make it off of the island with my daughter. And today I will give anything to protect my child. And she basically says, death to Darkseid. Our mission is underway. So, strangely enough, being the daughter of Darkseid does not mean that you immediately work for Darkseid. You apparently can want his death. It's a setup, I'll give them that. I mean, art is fantastic. I like this idea of they've already got the arc planned out in advance, and I know a little bit of what Darkseid War ends up being, so I like to see these little hints all scattered throughout here of showing just how far out they have planned this. So yeah, I think I'd say 7.5. I think it's probably the strongest out of the three, and definitely the part that got me the most hyped out of this little free comic book day issue. So yeah, that is all it really has to say about that. A collection of 3 stories that really could probably be skipped, but there's no harm in checking it out. Convergence number 4, written by Geoff King, art by Steven Segovia. So last issue, we had Dick Grayson was crippled by the Joker, and then Telos stepped in and was like, yo bro, what's going on? This issue pretty much picks up at that same point. We see Telos is reminiscing on, like, in every timeline, Dick Grayson is a superhero, except for this one that I'm looking at here, where he's just trying to get his son back, and he's a survivor from a doomed world, and he's like a journalist, like, but he has to fight for survival to even be worthy of me. And then Telos introduces himself to the audience, basically saying, like, hi, I'm Telos. Brainiac made me the planet, and I have to choose who is going to be the inhabitants of said planet. So at that point, he's like, yeah, no, your Batman sacrificed himself for you. In every timeline, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson are like thick as thieves. And Dick's like, his name was Thomas Wayne. And he's like, all right, Thomas then, whatever, it doesn't really matter. He asked what happened to the rest of Dick Grayson's group, and Dick is like, look, if you're going to kill me, he's like, I'm not going to kill you. What would I do without you? No, I'm going to use my weird silver goo stuff. And I need you to understand, I brought you here for the opportunity for you to prove yourself. I need you to join in the fight, in the convergence. So, basically Nightwing says, like, or not Nightwing, Dick, because he's not Nightwing, says, oh, but my back is useless, I can't fight. And he's like, yeah, it's shattered, like, you're never going to walk again, unless I put you in this weird silver goo, and then I will give you mobility, support, and even greater strength. Maybe one day you will come to think of me as a god. And that's only if you win, though. So we then cut down to Skitaris, which is underneath the planet, and we see Deimos talking with the rest of the crew. And the crew's like, this place is weird, man. I feel weirdness in the red and the green and all this stuff. And Deimos is like, yeah, this place was great right up until the Warlord took over. And now it sucks because he rules all of it. And they've got a few of the Warlord's troops there. And Deimos is just like, we should kill them and make an example. And Superman's like, they're unarmed and we don't kill unarmed people. He's like, right, you misunderstand. I meant they are a threat. But yeah, no, we need to get into the main section because there's a people inside called the Time Masters, and they will be the ones that will be able to save us all. They'll save our home. So they fly over the castle walls and they say, all right, we will free my world. Death to the Warlord. To which Superman says, once again, you're really in on this kill thing, man. So down in the pits of the castle, we see a bunch of Warlords people who are like, Deimos has returned. Where is our king? Cut to Warlord, who's out fighting some lizard man with someone named Tara. And the lizard men are apparently upset because the skies have changed and everything is weird. And Warlord's like, yeah, something happened to Skitaris. It's in a weird place now, and I don't know what's going on. And they're like, is this the prophecy of the end of Skitaris? And he's like, I don't know, but, like, let's go back to the castle and see what's happening. So back up on the top side, Telos is just saying to Dick Grayson, like, here's all the tie-ins. Check out all the cool fights that are going on. It's crazy out there. What would normally take years, forever to do all of this survival of the fittest, it's going to take like a couple days because that's really all we got here. And Dick Grayson tells him, like, what you're doing is wrong. You shouldn't have to listen to Brainiac when he tells you to do stupid stuff like this. Like, you could save all of them, Telos. You have that potential in you. And he's like, but then how would we know which one's the best? And Dick's like, you wouldn't. And he's like, I don't like that plan. I'm going to go ahead and figure out who's the best is. So we see that all of our Earth 2 groups are attacking the outskirts of Warlord's castle and whatnot. And Superman's like, wait a minute, hold on. What happened to Deimos? He just disappeared. I should be able to hear like a heartbeat or something. Guys, I'm starting to think Deimos, the dude with sculpts on his knee pads, is not on the up and up. And they're all like, yeah, that's fair. We probably should do it. Yolanda, how about you go find Deimos? So we cut to we cut to the Time Masters, who are all in their bubble, being held by Shakira, the Curse of the Black Cat is her apparently full title. And she's like, if you swear to fight against Deimos, we'll let you all out. And they're like, we're not going to, screw you. We don't even want to be a part of this at all. And he's like, well, then I'm not going to let you out. Telos once again is talking to Dick Grayson, and Dick is literally just like saying the exact same things. He's just like, you're not just a planet, you're sentient, you can make choices. And he's like, you're right, I am. I can make choices. I choose to make everybody fight. And Dick's like, God damn it. And he's like, look, you need to fight for your lives. If it'll help you, consider the fact that you're fighting for your son's life. How about that? That's a good motivation. So then we cut over to Deimos, who I guess is making his way down to the catacombs, and Yolanda's hiding in the shadows, and Deimos is like, I know you're there, man. Like, yes, you figured it out. I'm actually evil. I studied in dark magic and whatnot, and the dark power has shown me the secret to this world and how I can take on Telos and all that stuff. And Yolanda's like, well, I do want to take on Telos, but all of my instincts say that you're a bad dude and I should kill you, so I'm going to slit your throat. And he just immediately backhands her away, like, no problem. And he's like, bro, you just use the red. I have studied all magic, light and dark. You don't even have like a inkling of my power here. So he continues down and he's like, oh, I smell another animal that's been tapped into the red. And we cut to Shakira, and her hips do not lie as she is guarding the Time Masters and offers up the curse of the black cat. She just has cat powers. That's as far as I can tell you here. But Deimos is immediately like, I offered you a way out. You refused it. We're done here. And he just blasts her aside. In comes all the Earth 2 people, and they're like, Yolanda, where are you? And she calls out, she's like, I'm here, I'm weak, Deimos, he's doing something evil, who would have guessed? And they're all like, oh, where is Deimos? And he literally just is like, I'm over here, as he's draining the time chronal energy from all of these Time Masters, and he's like, ah, yes, I see all the timelines now, how they branch and converge. Earth 2 heroes, you were once the Justice Society, the first heroes of all. You were at the center of this. And Jay Garrick, you were at the center of the first multiversal breach with the different Flash. And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. But we're going to kick your ass. So we cut back over to Warlord and Terra as they're like, oh, there's a force field up around our castle. We can't get in, but maybe we can go in under the dark tunnels. And Warlord says, that's super risky, but yeah, we have no other choice. So at that point, Telos and Dick Grayson just kind of teleport into the middle of this room. And Telos is like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? This is crazy. And Deimos is like, oh, Telos. All right, well, you know, that makes enough sense. I'm going to have you witness the truth behind the convergence. And so he uses his chronal energy to open up a portal to Brainiac. And he says, Brainiac, I offer to free you from your prison. To which straight up Brainiac says, oh, Deimos, all right, what do you want? Free me and you shall have it. So, for anyone who wasn't paying attention to Future's End, he got put into a T-sphere. He was miniaturized and put into a T-sphere, and he was locked away in there, which is the reason that Telos went a little bit stir-crazy, because Brainiac was not around. And so I guess they found a way to get him out. Sure. God, it's not that this is like a horrible issue. It's a fine enough issue. I don't have that many qualms with it. But like, this series is so different from what I like. Okay, the tie-ins are doing a thing, and it's all like the, yeah, you know, bracket, everyone's going up against each other and they got to fight or whatever. This series, like, is so tenuously attached to that, where it's like, yeah, no, the fighting's going on, and trust me, that's really, really important. But like, everything else in this series has been, that doesn't matter at all. That is the least important aspect of this. Now, Earth 2, oh, good lordy, Earth 2. That's the center point of everything. Also, Warlord. I don't know anything about Warlord. I don't know anything about Skitaris. This is pulling parts of the continuity that are very specific to a very select number of people. Anyway, I'm going to say this one is a 6. That's about as high as I can go with it. It's not that I think that it's any worse than it really has been. It's just kind of, as we drag on and nothing is happening, or at the very least confusing things are happening, my patience is running out more than anything else. Convergence Action Comics #1, written by Justin Gray, art by Claude St. Aubin. So we are in Metropolis from Earth 2 pre-crisis, aka the Golden Age Earth. And we open up with a man asking for Superman and Lois Lane's autograph on a picture of them on their wedding day that apparently this guy's grandmother took. And I guess their identities were made public at some point under the dome, and he's just like, oh yeah, she died recently of a brain tumor. It totally sucked. But like, they said that Superman and Lois Lane, that was the aspiration of love that everyone should aim for. This dome, whatever's going on here, it's no match for Superman. And this guy goes off all happy and cheery, and Lois Lane is looking at Superman and just like, look, powers are no powers. You're always going to be Superman to me, honey. And he's just like, yeah, well, Superman would find a way out of here, I guess, but whatever. And he points out that things are different for them, specifically him and Kara, aka Power Girl, as they've essentially been turned human, but he phrases it more as, we're not the heroes we were before. It's just this feeling of failure that we have. Then we cut to Moscow, because this does not bury the lead that the opponents are from the Red Son of Krypton storyline, where Superman was in Russia. That was his thing. He landed in communist Russia. So we have Superman, Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor, who in this is an American businessman / kind of a protagonist in a way, and then Stalin, who's of course just here. And they're basically saying the people are getting upset, the people are angry, what are we supposed to do about this? And Lex Luthor's just poking the bear. He's just like, well, you kind of suck, Stalin, and what are you going to do about it? You need my mind in order to continue with this stuff. And Superman kind of like tells Lex, hey man, probably back off, don't do that. But Stalin recognizes like, okay, fine, yeah, whatever. So they talk about why the dome might be down, whether it's a zoo or an experiment or whatever else. But as Lex keeps on poking the bear, eventually Stalin pulls a gun on him, and he's just like, no, I know you need me more than anything else. And Superman's like, look, Lex believes there's a way that, we will be challenged and we have to be given the opportunity to prove our worth. We just have to wait until that comes. So Stalin lets them go, and Superman's like, look, Luthor, seriously, can you tone it down a little bit? He's like, maybe eventually. I gotta go hang out with my wife, Lois Lane. So then we cut back over to Metropolis. We meet up with Power Girl, who has apparently married some guy named, I believe it's Andrew, or at least is dating him. I don't know. He's making dinner. She comes home from aerobics, and she's like, hey, I lost my Kryptonian metabolism, and I actually have to work out to lose weight. I've gained 15 pounds since the dome came down. Your cooking's too good, Andrew. So she goes, hops in the shower before Clark and Lois come by, visiting later on that evening, and she hops on the scale, and she's like, oh god, my skin doesn't glow anymore. I have to visit a dentist. I have bags under my eyes. This sucks. I hate being practically human. And we get flashbacks to her as a hero, along with the rest of the Golden Age heroes, going around beating people up, and just like, yeah, no, that was fantastic. I loved all of it. And it's one day I'm flying around, and then my powers kick out. I fall through this skylight into a pool, and it's the only reason I survived. And she looks up and sees the dome, but then we see, as she gotten out of the shower, her back is still exposed, and it's all cut up from the glass that she crashed through the window. So back over in Moscow, Lex and Lois are talking, and Lois is trying to get Lex to not think about science stuff for a minute, but he's like, oh, I'm sorry, dear. You see, I did work for the CIA or whatever, and I had this electronic device that would find all this sort of stuff that Russia is keeping underneath the ground. And so I've had an interest in that. And she's like, dude, we're under the dome. You're not part of the CIA anymore. He's like, oh, au contraire. Hey, let me show you something. I want you to see something I've been working on. So he takes her to some sort of bunker where, I don't know if this was something from the story, but he made the invisible jet. But according to him, it was already capable of being invisible, but the pilot would still be visible inside. And he said, that was stupid, so I made it better. These stupid Russians need my help no matter what. And that's where Superman comes in and he's like, okay, that's quite enough of that. And he basically is coming in again saying, like, look, the next time we meet with Stalin, if you upset him again, I can't help you. He is way too pissed off at you. You need to be able to give him a little bit here, okay? I'm giving you this warning. Cut over to Metropolis. Lois is wine drunk and she is upset that we are talking about the dome again. She wants to have one night without talking about the dome. So she storms off and Clark and Andrew talk for a minute and it's just like, well, we all kind of work for the news. It is hard to avoid talking about the big elephant in the room. Kara comes back from checking on Lois and just like, yeah, she kind of wants to go, Clark. Maybe it's time that you guys check out. And as Andrew and Kara are standing outside, Telos pops over the intercom and says, hey, everybody, domes are coming down. Get ready to fight. And we don't get to see their reaction, but we do see over in Moscow, Wonder Woman is standing there ready at attention, ready to fight whoever she needs to. So I guess Action Comics is going to be focused on Wonder Woman. And I only say that because I know what Superman's doing in a different book. Yeah, it's okay. I like it more from how it fleshes out the Red Sun part more than the Earth 2 stuff. I think that it doesn't really do a lot to tell. I don't even know if Andrew is a pre-existing character, if this is someone that just showed up. Like, I don't know who the hell he is. So, yeah, a little bit of a problem there, but everything else is okay. I don't want to say it's a bit too light on the details, but it just feels like they were misappropriated. Like, it was a bit too much focus on one side, and I don't feel like I got enough on the Earth 2. So it's still pretty okay. I'm gonna say it's a 6.5. Is just not my favorite out of this, so take what I can get. Convergence Detective Comics #1, written by Len Wein, art by Dennis Cowan. So we pick up on Earth 30, aka Red Sun storyline. We're in Moscow, and we are before the dome comes down. Superman's flying over Moscow. It is apparently National Superman Day, where he's just heading around, letting everyone cheer at him, and he's like, yes, hello, I'm Superman. And then all of a sudden, dome. And then Superman ends up crashing into the dome, and he lands in the open arms of a Lenin statue that breaks his fall. And everyone's like, whoa, Comrade Superman, you cool? And he's like, yeah, totally. Just got distracted. Oh God, where are my powers? So then we cut over to Earth 2, aka Golden Age Earth, and we meet up with Helena Wayne and Dick Grayson. Helena Wayne is Huntress, and Dick Grayson is still Robin. And they're driving around the Batmobile. Turns out that they were called to Metropolis because there's a JSA meeting going on. Batman's dead, by the way. I don't know if that's common knowledge, but Bruce Wayne is dead. There's a JSA meeting, and recently the skies have been red, like constantly, because we're coming into Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that's just been happening. So as they're driving into Metropolis, we see that they arrive at what is apparently almost identical to their New York headquarters, to which they make the comment of, why didn't we meet at our normal headquarters anyway? Why did we go to Metropolis? The answer is so that we could take Metropolis and put it in a dome. But regardless, at that point, that's when the dome comes down and everyone's like, great, now what? 4 months later, Moscow. Superman is doing a motorcade. He's waving to all the people. He's not flying around. He's there with his friend, not Pete Ross. And over the months, people have still cheered, but more and more people are getting antsy over why the hell is there a dome around the city? And Superman points out, yeah, this propaganda thing ain't working. We need to come up with something new to convince the people, because they are starting to get a bit more upset here. Back over to Metropolis, we see Helena and Dick are talking about it's great that we have a bat cave in Metropolis because there was a Wein Enterprises that was built here, but it's been quiet. We haven't had a lot to do, and then all of a sudden they get a emergency alert. So they run down into the bat cave, get into their outfits. Helena's dressed as Huntress, but Dick is still dressed as Robin. And Helena points out, and it's like a hybrid costume. It's like part Batman, part Robin. He's like, are you serious? wear the damn bat suit. It's what my dad would have wanted. And he's like, no, it's not that simple. We're not doing this right now. Just whatever. Just we'll deal with it eventually. 4 months later, we cut to Superman giving a speech to the people. He says, hello, comrades. I'm the one who put up the dome. I discovered months ago that there was going to be an alien attack, and I don't know when they're going to strike, but I had to protect all of the Russian cities. Yes, that's right. All of the Russian cities are under domes. So do not be afraid. I will take down the domes as soon as humanly possible. And then he flies up into the air as people start cheering for him and saying like, oh, thank you for saving us. And then it turns out he was just like on a rope being lifted up by a helicopter. And it's like, perfect. Nobody noticed. It went great. We should at least be able to calm down people for some period of time. Cut over to Earth 2. Toyman is attacking. And Helena and Dick point out he's stealing things. Where's he gonna spend it? Like, we've been under the dome. Like, what's he planning on doing here? He's really not thinking ahead on this one. And Toyman's like, yeah, get out of my way. Let me do this thing. And they're like, no. So they managed to pull the Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, like wrapping the legs up around the thing, making it trip. And the whole, like, headpiece busts off of Toyman's toy. And they're just like, all right, well, we got him. Cool. We then go over to 4 more months later, bringing us up to now in Moscow. Whatever his name is there. Superman is walking around Moscow. He sees people waiting in line for a single roll of toilet paper for hours and hours. He's like, oh God. And the graffiti on the walls is all defacing him, but he feels like he deserves it. And then all of a sudden his hat flies off and people are like, oh, it's Comrade Superman. Comrade Superman, you can help us. We're starving. Please do something, do anything. And then all of a sudden Telos comes over the intercom. Citizens, we're gonna fight. And Superman feels his power surging. He gets up and he flies out and he's like, fantastic. Meanwhile, over on Earth 2, we see Helena is once again trying to convince Dick to wear the outfit, become Batman. And he's like, look, I understand what you're saying, but like, I don't hold your breath. I really do not want to take on that mantle. And then all of a sudden they get the beep. They're told Telos is coming over the comms. It's a whole thing. So they go down, they get suited up again. And now they're debating like, okay, hold on. The Telos voice said we got to kill each other. Like, that I don't think we should do that. That's a bad thing. And they're like, agreed, let's not do that. That's perfectly fine. But as they're driving the Batmobile down, all of a sudden they're swept up in a teleporter, some sort of liquid, and as they come to a stop, they are dead center right in front of Moscow, right in front of Superman. And they're like, how the hell did we get to Russia? So Superman's like, please get out of the vehicle, turn it off, and don't make me ask you twice. And Dick's like, all right, we should probably do what the flying man says. And Elena's like, we're in the Batmobile, man. Fire off some missiles. Do what you need to. And he's like, whoa, hold on. Let's not do this. And she just presses the button, fires off 2 missiles. They both hit Superman. Dick is immediately like, why did you do that? We could have talked to him. We needed to. You just straight up murdered the guy. But of course it's Superman, so they just brush right off. And he's like, all right, well, that was a bit rude. I was hoping that we could talk about this, but now I'm not sure you're really the type for talking. And Dick opens up the thing and he's like, I apologize for my comrades' actions there. I am totally willing to talk. We can be civilized here. And so he gets out. Superman lands. They come up. They shake hands. They introduce each other and just like, hello, yeah, Superman, how's it going? I'm Dick Grayson, all that. And just like, all right, well, let's both find a way that we can save both of our places without needless carnage. And as they start trying to talk, all of a sudden the Batmobile engine kicks on and just starts driving into Moscow. And Superman's like, what is she doing? And he's like, she's impulsive. I'm sorry. And he's like, all right, I got to go deal with her. You stay put. Don't do anything. So Superman flies off to get Helena. Meanwhile, though, the people of Russia who have gathered around start gathering a bit too close to Dick. And he's like, okay, I at least need to get out of reach of the people here. So he grapple hooks up. Meanwhile, Superman goes and gets Helena. And she's like, oh, I got to do something. I got to get out of here before. I got to figure out how to take him down. And he just grabs the car and just being like, okay, you're in my city. I know every inch of this place. Now we're going to go back and we're going to discuss this in an adult manner. And Helena goes, all right, plan B, forgive me, Dick. And she presses the self-destruct button on the Batmobile, to which Dick sees that. And he's just like, Helena, what in the hell have you done? And that's the issue. I really like this one. I know nothing about the Golden Age Dick Grayson, Helena Wayne stuff. Like, I don't know where we left them going into Crisis. I didn't even know Bruce was dead. Their back and forth here is, I think, a little bit weak, but I like how it works in the end. It shows that Helena is like this big, impulsive, like, you know, never say die sort of thing, take immediate action, whereas Dick is a lot more level-headed, thinking it through. And then counterpoint that with the way they show the Comrade Superman just like trying to keep his people, admittedly via very propagandist means of not like being honest with them, but trying to keep them calm. I like how it comes together of Dick and Superman just being like, let's figure this out, because it makes sense for their characters. So yeah, I'm down for that. I really want to see how the second half is going to turn out, because obviously, you know, Dick may be upset. He might actually do something to like launch an attack, but ultimately that was Helena's decision. I'm curious to see if they are able to actually come to some sort of diplomatic thing. I'd imagine Lex ruins it though. So yeah, I'm going to say this is an 8.5. I really like it. The first half's a little iffy for me on the Earth 2 side, but everything else is just working on every level. Convergence, Justice Society of America, #1, written by Dan Abnett, art by Tom Derenick. So we pick up this issue with Jay Garrick as he's making his way into a Metropolis General Hospital. Apparently this was 5 hours ago. And it's over the radio. Alan Scott's basically saying like, well, Metropolis, it's 364 days under this dome and we're still kicking. We're still doing everything we can. We got that Metropolis spirit. And we see Jay Garrick is coming here to visit somebody. He meets up with a nurse named Kathy, who is basically, I guess, the caretaker of whoever it is he's coming to see. And as they get into the room, he's like, oh, he's peaceful. And, you know, sometimes I get the feeling that he's in there. He's just waiting to come back out. And Jay's like, yeah, me too. I get that too. So as he sits down in the room, we see that the person he's going to visit is Kent Nelson, aka Dr. Fate. And he's in a coma. And apparently he has been for pretty much the past year. And Jay just starts talking to him, just like, oh, yeah, you know, the arthritis is catching up on me ever since the powers went down. And, you know, I'm not the only one. Like last night, I got in the tub and I couldn't get out for 45 minutes because my back was just totally shot. And same sort of things happening to all of us. Like, Alan thinks that it's because of our powers that, like, it's doubly hitting us hard now. But, like, you know, Carter's got problems with his wrists. Alan has high blood pressure. And you're in a coma, which I wouldn't wish on anybody. But at the same time, like, you haven't had to go through all this. You've been asleep this whole time. And that's just, I'm kind of envious of that. And he realizes how unfair that is. He's like, no, you've been missing life. And, I'd give anything to have you back with us. And he looks out the window up at the dome and he's like, well, whatever it was, it took away our powers. It took you away too. And, you know, we'll still be there whenever you come back. And so eventually he makes his way back down the street. We see him climbing up a fire escape, and he's just like having to pause halfway up, just like, oh, God, Jesus. Up on top of the roof, we see a elderly Carter Hall, talking to his son Hector. And it's a long conversation, but Carter's working on a garden for sustainable food practices here underneath the dome. And Hector's basically saying, hey, look, I am specifically part of Infinity Inc. And when this dome comes down, and even before then, Infinity Inc. is ready to go. We're ready to fight and take on whoever did this. And he's like kind of halfway pushing Carter, saying like, is the JSA gonna be there? / if they're not, we're cool with that. We just are gonna be taking over. Like, we don't want you to think that we're stepping on any toes here, in more or less words than that. And Carter's just like, hey, if any of that comes to pass, like, we'll see what happens there. But like, the future belongs to Infinity Inc., if it even happens. And he's like, all right, thanks, Dad. That really does a lot for me. So at that point, Jay Garrick steps up and he's like, oh, hey, it's a long climb here. Hector, good to see you. And he's like, yeah, totally. Anyway, I got to go. See you later. So Carter invites Jay down for some tea. They start having a conversation, and Garrick asks, what that was all about up on the roof, what's going on there, and he's just like, oh, yeah, he wanted to know what was going on there, and maybe when it's over, even if we have our powers back, even if all that happens, maybe we just stand back. Maybe we let the next generation take over. And at that point, the phone rings. Carter picks it up, and it's Al and Scott. Something's happened with Kent Nelson in the hospital. They need to get there now. So they rush their way over, and turns out Kent's opened up his eyes. And so everyone comes in, they're like, Kent, what's up? And he just very silently whispers one last time. And we see Carter looking out the window, and Telos is on the intercom. Hey, everybody, it's coming down. Get ready to fight. And before he can even finish his monologue, in comes this giant mechanical... The best way I could describe it is halfway between a gorilla and like some sort of bug. It's a big machine with guns on it, and it's just terrorizing the city. And the guys look out the window and they recognize it as a weapon from Quard, the antimatter world. And as they're looking out, they're just like, what the hell were we supposed to do? And Garrick feels like the speed force inside him, and he's like, something's happening, guys. I think our powers are coming back. And Kent's out of bed. He's got like his hospital sheet draped around him like a cloak, and he's like, one last time. And they're like, Kent, you've been in a coma, man. What's up? What's going on? And he's like, look, I can grant us one last thing, our youth. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And what he basically says is, look, I can bring back, powers of Dr. Fate, all that sort of stuff. I can give us our powers and our youth back, but it will be temporary and it will kill us. Like, it may not be an immediate thing, but our life force is going to be burned the hell out once this is done. But we can go out there and we can shine gloriously for one last moment, just one last time. And without them even answering, they turn and face the camera of the panel, and they're all young again. They all got their powers, and they say, all right, one last time, let's make it count, as they rush out to go fight. I have zero attachment to the Justice Society. I never really read any of their stuff. I don't really have an attachment to them. In this incarnation, obviously, Earth 2 was its own thing. I like it. I like this little breakdown of we are past our time, and it's not even so much of we want to get back into the saddle again. It's if we have to, can we? And I like that examination of it. And I'm, saying this like, oh, we can get our powers one last time, we can jump in there, but it's going to kill us, is a good way to get around that, of the responsibility they feel balanced with their desires to do it again. So yeah, I'm going to say this one is very good writing, very well done. I look forward to seeing who they go up against. Like I said, it looks like a giant thing, and they call it the Weaponers, but I don't know anything about the Weaponers of Cord either. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more on that in the second issue. But this one I'm going to say is a 7.5. I think it's definitely up there at the very least. I think art style is a little bit too house for me to get it all the way up to an 8. It didn't do anything special, but it's good. Convergence Infinity Inc. #1, written by Jerry Ordway, art by Ben Caldwell. So we are on the pre-crisis Earth 2, aka Golden Age Earth, and I'll be upfront with you. I know nothing about Infinity Inc. I can piece together some things from this book, but names is not one of them. So we open up with a performance of The Tempest in the domed city. Jade is currently playing the role of a daughter in this play, and the rest of Infinity Inc., or at least some members of it, are out in the audience watching. And we get a brief little thing of showing like, yeah, here we all are fighting, and we were a big group. We did Infinity Inc., but then we've been trapped here for the past year, and a lot of us don't have our powers. But more importantly, they all feel a little left out because, like, the parents, the previous generation, are not here to watch them. Like, they are imagining them up in the front row, but the front row is empty. So Jade gets a little bit sad about that, but as she finishes up the show, we see her brother, Todd Obsidian, I believe, and the rest of the group, who I definitely don't know the names of, are all like, hey, you did great, you did fine, you did fantastic. So Todd apparently has brought a date, and Jade questions it because it's a guy, and he's like, "Oh, who's this? Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just a friend. Don't worry about it. Ha ha ha. Geez, geez, geez." And everyone's like, "Yeah, okay, tee hee." But then the friend's just like, "Wait a minute, hold on. You guys were saying something about like a team or whatever. What's that all about?" And they're like, "Yeah, we were Infinity Inc., pal. Don't forget it." And he's like, "Who?" And as they're walking out of the building, like the one guy's just like, "Oh, come on, we fought Ultra Humanite, we saved Milwaukee that one time, we did all that stuff." And yeah, it's just not happening. They call him Star. I don't know what his real name is, but I assume he's the Star Spangled Kid. And Jade's just like, "Hey, look, we weren't a team for very long. It's not that big of a deal. And all of us just wanted to be in the JSA. It's not a big thing." Star Spangled Kid's like, "Hey, look, one day we're going to get our powers back. This dome's coming down. And then Infinity Inc. is the next big thing, all right?" So at that point, Jade goes and says, "Hey, the JSA was a no-show, but so was the nephew of Star Spangled Kid, Henry, aka Brainwave Jr. So Jade goes to check on him. Looks like he's passed out drunk in a crashed helicopter in a building. I don't know what that's about, but as she goes to check on him, all of a sudden there's two lowlives who come up and are just like, "Oh, hey, man, that guy's a loser. Why don't you get with someone a little bit better, And they're just like, "No, thanks. Don't really want to, not in a million years." And just like, "Oh, was that, how about you come down with me?" And she's like, "Hey, look, I don't know. I am the daughter of Green Lantern, so you better back off." And he's like, "Superheroes aren't a thing around here, and I don't see no Green Lantern around." So he pulls her down, starts to get a little bit rough with her. She goes full-on judo mode, kicks him down the stairs, and she's like, "Look, I already called the Citizens Patrol. It's on its way. You're screwed." And they're just like, "Oh, man." So we cut to some sort of police force that comes up. They say Lyta is on the team, who they say is an Amazon. I'm not familiar with her, but we see this. Jade is dragging along this Henry guy, Brainwave Jr., puts him in a cab and asks to go somewhere else. So we see that I believe they're back at Todd's place, or possibly Jade's if they share it. And basically they get the lowdown on Brainwave Jr. is that Brainwave was a villain. Brainwave Jr. is not, or at least is trying not to be. But ever since he's been underneath the dome, he doesn't have his brainwave abilities, but he does get like cluster headaches, super bad migraines. So he drinks constantly to just kind of stay asleep and not have to feel these things. But as he wakes up now, he gets some migraine medicine from Jade, and Todd learns about all this, just like, "Oh, I had no idea. That's crazy." However, Henry does point out that he met Alan, he met Green Lantern at one point, who basically told him to stay away from Jade and Todd because he's apparently no good and whatever like that. And Jade kind of takes that personally. We then cut over to Albert and Star Spangled Kid. I don't know who Albert is, but he's basically fixing up the plane that the Infinity Inc. is using, and he's just like, "Yeah, look, this thing is like, we don't have any reason to fly this. There's nothing going on. We can't get out of here." And Star Spangled Kid is like, "Look, I need the team, okay? I need this to be ready to go just in case the team is ever needed again." We then cut up to a rooftop garden and stuff like that. There's a girl who's chasing a chicken around the rooftop. She chases it off of the rooftop and starts plummeting down. And then Norda, this guy who has Hawkman wings, goes and catches her and sets her back on the rooftop. And this is another member. So we then cut over to a few members of Infinity Inc. as they've built this giant laser beam, and they're hoping that it will be able to burst through the dome. And so as they're ready to set it up, they're like, "Okay, here we go," it's getting ready to fire. And then all of a sudden, Telos comes over the comm, "Citizens, dropping the domes, be ready to fight." And we see Jade's powers are coming back, Norda's flying around, Obsidian's turning to Obsidian. Everyone's just getting their powers back, including Brainwave Jr., who is not okay. But as the dome falls down and they see the darkness outside, they're like, "Oh God, who are we going to have to fight out there?" And they are immediately paired up with the future / alternate timeline where Jonah Hex basically went and did a Mad Max thing, and it's called the Hex universe. Don't think about it. But the Infinity Inc.'s now back in their costumes. They're just like, all right, we have to go fight against them, and you know, if it's means that we have to fight, then we have to fight, but like, let's maybe not try to go too far if we don't have to, but we have to save our city. So they get loaded up. Brainwave Jr. apparently was in charge of like telepathy, learning about plans beforehand, but because he's so out of whack, he's not going to be of any use. So as they start making their way into the town, I believe it might be Stripesy? I don't know. It's one of the guys comes up and is like, hey, all right, we're here. If you've got any sort of plan, do it now. And Star Spangled Kid basically jumps out of the ship and is just like, I'm going to try diplomacy. I'm going to just go try to talk and see if we can get this figured out. So we meet the Hex Gang, which is like 7 different people. And they're all just like, oh, they're on a flying ship. And they've got a whole thing going on. Maybe we should just take them out now. And Hex is like, no. I'm going to talk to him first. I'm going to see what's up. So Star Spangled Kid is like, hi, I'm the Star Spangled Kid. And he's just like, hey, what do you want written on your tombstone? And Star Spangled Kid's like, I was hoping we could actually talk about this. Nobody actually needs to get hurt. You know, we could team up against this Telos guy. And Hex is just like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Someone here is going to start the show. And, you know, I think it's going to be us. And all of a sudden this dude from behind Hex just blows up the ship. Like, just straight up attacks it. It crashes down out of the sky. And Star Spangled Kid's like, as it seemed like Hex's crew is just immediately going in for the kill. So, yeah. I still don't know what Infinity Inc. is. I don't think this was a very newcomer-friendly experience for me in both sides of the timeline here. There was a little bit where I could get the general team dynamic, but there's like 7 or 8 members of the crew, and I don't know any of them, even exiting this. The only reason I know Jade and Obsidian is because they have had more appearances post like New 52 of things that I've read. They've at least been around. Everyone else, though, has been essentially off the map. So I'm going to say this is a 6. It's just like nothing was really working for me here. Even the art style was a little bit off. So maybe we'll get something better in the second half. Maybe I'll figure out who Infinity Inc. is, but not for now. Convergence, World's Finest, #1, written by Paul Levitz, art by Jim Fern, additional art by Shannon Wheeler. So this one is a bit of a weird one. We open up in the Earth 2 Golden Age, pre-crisis, whatever. We are technically following the 7 Soldiers of Victory. That is our main component here. However, we don't actually follow them. We follow a guy whose name is Scribbly Gibbet, who's a cartoonist who I guess just follows the 7 soldiers around and is kind of like the bumbling idiot that they have to save decently often. I don't know, but we open up in 1940 where Superman flies by Scribbly one day and he sees that and he's like, I immediately do what I had to do. And he has some wet sidewalk pavement in front of him and he draws a scribble of Superman. And he says, that's when I'm going to be a cartoonist. And we see him become a newspaper cartoonist where he draws things of the 7 Soldiers of Victory and general heroic things as well. And this is 1980. We see Metropolis. He works for Metropolis News and he watches like the Crimson Avenger go and take down a mugger. And then Sir Justin comes in riding his Pegasus. And as he scribbly describes, like, the Metropolis News group is stretched so thin that not only is he a cartoonist, but he can also be a reporter if he wants to. He can do whatever he wants. And he asks this guy on the street, like, do you feel safe living in Metropolis? And he's like, I just moved here from upstate. This is crazy that you guys have this sort of stuff. How do you handle this? And he's just like, we count on the good guys to take care of us. So 1985 happens. The skies start going crimson more often than not. We see, as far as I'm aware, a circus escapes, or some sort of animal-based villain, because a rhinoceros is making its way through town and Vigilante is trying to lasso it. Finally, he gets the lasso around the neck, but it's not controlling it, so he directs it using the lasso into a brick wall that ends up knocking it out. And Scribbly is like, oh, Vigilante, can I get a comment? And then all of a sudden he's grabbed by pterodactyls up into the sky, gets dragged away, and Vigilante's like, God damn it, Scribbly, now we gotta save your ass again. To which Green Arrow and Speedy are up on the roof, and they're like, we got him, don't worry. And they fire some special arrows at the pterodactyl to try to get it to drop Scribbly. Unfortunately, it doesn't drop him over a close-by building, but actually into the streets below. So Green Arrow and Speedy have to jump off of the building and deploy arrow like nets in order to catch him. For whatever reason, it still doesn't work, and Sir Justin has to come in and grab him out of the air, to which Scribbly's like, you gotta save Green Arrow and Speedy. And Sir Justin says, innocents come first and then my compatriots if I can. But he can't. He doesn't make it in time, and Green Arrow and Speedy both die because of what Scribbly did. So, turns out what's actually happening here is the giant wave of antimatter that goes along with Crisis on Infinite Earths is washing over Metropolis, and as it's hitting the outside of the city outskirts, all of a sudden, dome. And as the dome hits, Pegasus loses its wings. It crashes down to the ground, turns into a normal horse. Sir Justin pulls out his sword like, oh, we shall find the demon who's, oh God. And he just suddenly starts turning into an old guy. And he's like, my immortality is gone. I'm going to die. I'm going to turn into dust right now. Scribbly, my last words. And Scribbly's like, hold on. I think for whatever reason, it's just keeping you as an old guy. You're not actually turning to dust. And he's like, all right, well, I probably would have preferred to turn into dust. Otherwise, I'm stuck in this stupid dome. And immediately Scribbly points out, like, wait a minute, what about our power supply? What about our air supply? We're going to die in here within, like, days at the very least. And so we get Scribbly saying, here's the whole event of everything that happened. First few weeks, we were pounding like crazy trying to figure out how to get out of here because we thought we were going to die. Then we realized we were still getting power and water. That was kind of weird. Air conditioning units, we got those working in order to filter out smells. Heroes continue doing hero stuff, trying to keep things as normal as humanly possible. The library took off as a big thing because we weren't getting any new movies. I found religion, and I kind of slowly came to terms with being under the dome, whereas some people really tried to get out even faster. I continue my cartoonist work. Turns out that Stripesy, who was doing the air conditioning fixing, he died of pneumonia, so he died there. We also had memorials for Green Arrow and Speedy. Slowly over time, morale suffered, and at a certain point you couldn't even call it morale. We lost a World Series in terms of we didn't have one. We instead had to have our two local baseball teams go up against each other, and it was like a joke of Major League versus Minor League. Newspaper kept going out. People were comparing things to the Twilight Zone episodes, and then, yeah, that's basically all that happened. So he's still going around town, still finding like things to do cartoons about. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not, but he always, sees people coming together in Metropolis, doing what they can to help out each other. And he goes to Victory, which is Sir Justin's horse, and he gives it a carrot. Sir Justin comes up and he's like, oh, yes, you think we'll get out of here, Scribbly, I know, but I think we're going to lay to waste here. The heroes of your time have faded. I saw Camelot fall, man, and this is a lot like that. Admittedly, we didn't have a dome, but like the feeling, the sentiment, you get what I'm saying. But in the event we ever do get out, Sir Justin will be there to have the fight. And in that exact moment, Sir Justin's sword starts lighting up. We see the horse is now back to a Pegasus, and Justin is back to a young man again. And he's like, hey, I don't know what's happening, but I'll take it. And so he gets back on his Shining Knight outfit, and he's like, time to go take out this dome. To which point, Scribbly points up at the sky and says, actually, it's already gone. And Telos is over the intercom, and he's like, oh, yeah, you guys are going to fight other people. That's what's going to happen. And Scribbly's like, oh, my God, that's impossible. This must be magic or illusion. And Justin's like, nah, it ain't. I know that stuff. This is crazy-ass sci-fi stuff. This is what But he looks up at Telos, and he says, hey, screw you. I ain't bending the knee. I ain't doing what you want. And Telos says, okay, Sir Justin. And he, like, reaches out a hand and, like, scoops them up, all of them up, and says, look, Sir Justin, you are like one of the oldest souls that I have under the domes. I'm curious to see what your wisdom will do in a fight, but yeah, you got to fight for it. Like, that's going to happen here. So Metropolis will possibly live, but here's the question, which one? And so Scribbly's just like, yeah, no, man, I'm in. I'm keeping with you. If this is my last thing as a cartoonist, so be it. So Telos just like goes into the center of Metropolis, sets them down alongside a bunch of other horse riders, and then the moment he says begin, they are struck by massive amounts of lightning, and Scribbly says, and that's the moment I knew I was going to die. So it says on the back of the book that they're going up against the Weaponers of Claude. You can also tell by the cover of the next issue. But, yeah, this was really all about Scribbly Gibbet. And I guess kind of Sir Justin. But, like, who the hell is Scribbly Gibbet? It's an interesting name. I'll give him that. So, yeah, I don't know anything about Seven Soldiers. Not anything major, at least. I know a few things about the individual makeup of the members. But everything else is just straight over my head. I guess I'd say this is probably I don't know, I kind of liked it. It's not a conventional Convergence issue, and that's kind of what I like about it a little bit more, is that it's just kind of following a normal guy who's tangential to the hero stuff going on, and that makes it a little bit easier to swallow the hero pill when it's like people I don't know. You know, just having this guy be the central point, learning about him, and the Seven Soldiers are just tangential to that. So I'm going to say 7. I think I'm sitting around there. Art style does definitely help. I like the cartoonish stuff that Shannon Wheeler adds as well. So yeah, it's weird, and I'm curious to see where we get to in the next issue, but I'm up for it at the very least. Convergence Shazam #1, written by Geoff Parker, art by Evan Shaner. So this is following Shazam in the Fawcett City, Fawcett Comics world, whatever. It's its own separate timeline where it's just Shazam and related co. We see that Telos apparently gave the word that the domes were coming up like a few hours ago, but the domes still have not come up. It's been, according to them, delayed by like 7 hours for some other reason. And we see Billy is standing on top. Billy Batson, by the way, is standing on top of a building. And he says Shazam. And he's waiting for the lightning bolt, but it doesn't come down. And we get over the radio that there's some meeting that's being held by the mayor out in front of town hall. So as they go out in front, a bunch of people have gathered up, and they're just like, oh, what? Are we going to have to fight? What if they're aliens? What if they're monsters? What do we do? And we see someone gets up and starts trying to talk, just being like, all right, just talk in terms of the police. And then immediately, before anything can be said, this angry dude comes up wearing a trench coat, and he's like, we're dead walking. We're already screwed. Captain Marvel abandoned us. What are we supposed to do? And Billy, who happens to be up on stage, because he's just an upstanding kid like that, he's like, sir, maybe you haven't heard my radio reports. I can tell you exactly what happened. And he's like, no, Captain Marvel protected this city when I was a boy, and then again when I was a man, and now he's gone. And it's whenever we need him, he vanished. And Billy's like, well, sir, here's what happened. Captain Marvel was, you know, he had these powers along with the whole Marvel family, and they fought tirelessly, and they fought against all these bad dudes. However, one day, Dr. Savannah trapped the Marvels and sent them into deep space in suspended animation, and they didn't come back until the 80s, give or take. And now that they were free, it was a strange world for them, but they continued to fight the good fight. However, whatever happened here, they must have been out of the city when all this happened, and that's why they haven't been able to come in and fight. And immediately it is like, doesn't matter, 30 seconds without heroes, we're gonna die. That's what's gonna happen. We're in charge of our destinies now. And he opens up his coat and reveals he's wearing a suicide vest. He's got bombs on him, to which point 2 other heroes named Bullet Man and Bullet Girl come up, sweep him up into the sky, and he just explodes up there. And everyone's like, see, we'll be safe as long as we have Bullet Man and Bullet Girl. They've stood by our city. So off to the side, we see, I believe it's the mayor. It might just be some man, like maybe police commissioner or something, and a man named Dudley, who apparently is a friend of the Marvel family. And they're speaking, and they're just like, meet at the regular place tonight. Come separately. And we see, what's his name? I don't know, Freddy. That's it. Freddy is like, hey, I've got them acting weird. We're going to have to follow them tonight. So they go out and follow them, including Mary. She's along as well. Just being like, oh, don't we have bigger concerns right now? It's just like, no, we need to know what this is about. So they follow this guy in, Morris. Apparently he's been diverting money that's meant for other things under the dome to do his own little pet projects. And so they go and they follow him. And as they're going through, Mary's basically like, hey, look, our magic words don't work anymore. It's like, we are just kids. Should we really be doing this? And Billy's just like, it's the right thing to do. And also, they will work again. I promise you, they will. So they go down into a subway where they meet up with the both of them, and just like, all right, well, we found where their project is. We got to go down and check it out. And as they go down, Mary's like, I don't know, it feels weird following two weird men underground. And Billy's like, oh, it's always worked out for me. So as they get down, it gets pitch black. They say, boy, I wish I had a flashlight. And all of a sudden, bright lights turn on, and it turns out it's the head of a robot guy named Mr. Atom, who apparently was smashed to pieces by Captain Marvel, but he's like, ho, but he didn't destroy all of my body, and therefore I was able to be fixed by this guy. And we see a caveman working on some tech parts called King Kull. And it seems that these are all members of a monster society. They've all been working underneath the city this entire time. And Kull's like, oh, we're close to finishing our thing or whatever. And this is where Dudley and Morris come in, and they're just like, ah, yes, you see, these two have been working for so long, but they are not the masterminds of what's going on. And Dudley puts on some big round glasses, and he goes, hee hee, to which point all the Marvel kids are like, wait a minute, hold on, I recognize that laugh. And he flips a switch to activate a hologram that shows that underneath the Dudley persona, it is actually Dr. Sivana. And Morris as well is a man named Ibak, who I guess has a similar transformation as Captain Marvel with Shazam. And Sivana explains the situation that just before they got domed, Sivana and Ibak wanted to work together along with a wizard named Augur to allow them to transform into people that the Marvel family would trust and take their place and then learn their secrets. They immediately learned the secrets because the kids were stupid and transformed right in front of Dudley. But when they were still transformed when the domes came down, and they needed to use the Ibak magic word in order to transform back. So they were stuck like that for a year. But now that the domes are coming down, they're willing to put their plans more into fruition here. So they bind up Freddy, Billy, and Mary, put them in a cell along with the actual Morris and Dudley. And just like, aha, yes, well, you will be kept here while we take over everything upstairs. And that's where a voice comes in from the side and says, hey, get away from those kids. And they say, who's talking? And they say, it's me, talking Tawny, the tiger. And it's just a tiger man, for anyone who's unfamiliar. So at that point, Mary kicks the gun out of Savannah's hand. Tawny starts fighting against Ibak, who's this big muscular guy, but it turns out it's just a hologram. He still actually has the body of Morris, who's this old dude. So Tawny's able to just flip him over his head. Billy gets one of their guns and says, see, friendship trumps your friendships formed by hate. And then the gun gets blasted out of his hand by Adam, who's like, well, it's not hate, it's based on evil. So they start getting smacked around a little bit by Ibak in the group, and Ibak says his name. He says, oh, the folly of attacking Ibak, and that causes Ibak to transform. And they're like, wait a minute, hold on. He said a magic word and he transformed. Does that mean? And immediately Savannah's like, oh god, no. And so he's like, hell yeah, it does. Shazam! And so Billy turns into Captain Marvel. Mary and Freddy quickly follow suit, turning into their personas, and immediately they just start knocking heads, going crazy. All of them do try to fight back as best they can, the villains that is, but even Morris and Dudley get in and use the chains that they were bound up in to attack Savannah. So it's pretty clear that the Marvels do have the upper hand here. And eventually this cavern that they're working in starts caving in. It seems to crush everything underneath it. So Savannah, all of them are taken out. However, the Atom is missing his head. So Mr. Atom might still be capable of fighting. But while they've been underground, Mary Marvel points up to the guys and says, look at what's going on to Fawcett City while we've been underground. And they're being besieged by a bunch of Zeppelins that are all firing lasers down upon the city. According to the back, this is the Gotham by Gaslight universe is attacking them. So, like, I think that's steampunk, if I remember correctly. That, or it is just the ones that are set in old-timey, like, Victorian England, and isn't actually, like, steampunk, more Jack the Ripper-esque, but, you know, that kind of time period. Anyway, I like the Shazam stuff. And I should say I like the Captain Marvel stuff. It is... Evan Shaner's art is fantastic. It perfectly represents the time period. It's so good. As for the actual writing and all that, like, I don't know anything about Fawcett City going into pre-crisis, Thunderworld, like, no idea about any of that. But this did such a good job of not only explaining the timeline of all the events that went up to it, of like how Captain Marvel disappeared and then came back once DC bought the rights to it and da-da-da-da-da. I think all of that worked out so well of getting me informed, even up to the villains part of it, that I enjoyed it just as much as I would have if I was a fan going back of all that other stuff. The only thing I can critique is I don't know who the hell Morris is, but that is such a minor thing. So I'm going to say this is a... God, I'm going to say an 8. I'm going to say it's a great issue of this. It is actually worth checking out if you haven't. I don't know how the second part's going to be, but this first one, really, really good. Convergence Blue Beetle #1, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Yishan Lee. This is in the pre-crisis hub city, which is technically Charlton Comics. So while it is Blue Beetle, it is also The Question, Vic Sage, and Captain Atom. Also, reading that you somewhat need beforehand, because I'm going to mention it, is the Futures End issue of Booster Gold, strangely enough. So we open up in this, and there is a group of people that I guess are the Madmen, and they are staging a protest underneath the dome against the police, saying like, oh, we're mad and blah, blah, blah. And covering the event is reporter Vic Sage, saying like, oh, the authorities came for the weapon, you know, they're protesting curfews, rations, all that sort of stuff. And they all got guns, mind you. It's while the police are charging up, they got their shields behind them. We see that the captain for the police force is Captain Nathaniel Adam, and he's like, you're all in violation of curfew, put down your guns, go back to your homes. And they're like, ha, homes, yeah, great. Hey, you think it's so easy? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, am I laughing? So at that point, they open fire on the man, Captain Atom, and rest of the police also unload fire. Vic Sage is appalled. He's like, oh my god, this was a peaceful demonstration, now it's a war, this is crazy. And the police pull out a goddamn rocket launcher, fire it at the crowd, and just all of them are dead. And Vic's like, hey, did we get that on camera? And they're like, yeah, cool. Go, print it, do it, run it now. Do what you can. So they run off, they do that. And they're like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to go and get some questions. So we see him get prepped in his question outfit, obviously. And he goes up to Captain Atom. And he's like, all right, we're alone now, let's talk. And he's like, look, you just ordered a bunch of innocent people get killed. And he's like, innocent? No, they had guns. I gave them a choice to stand down, and you saw what they chose. And he's basically saying, like, look, I know you think you're helping by, like, giving these people a voice, but you are actively disrupting the peace, and you are causing just as much blood on the hands as they were. And questions like, look, regardless, I'm not here to judge you. Blue Beetle wants to talk. He wants your help on something. So we see Vic stays behind with the bodies, and he's just like, yeah, you know, it used to be us going around doing big hero things, but nowadays it's much less than that. And we see people are literally going around as soon as the madmen are dead, they're looting the bodies for shoes and watches. So At that point, we cut over to Ted Cord at Cord Industries. His assistant Tracy is coming in to check on him. He's built some crazy machine thing on the top floor of his building. And she's like, oh, hey, Tracy, I promise you this is going to work. And she's like, you said that like 50 times. And he's like, well, you know what they say about people who do stuff over and over and expect different results. And she's like, that they're crazy. That's what the saying is. And he's like, nah, I don't think that's what that is. But he opens up the top of the building to let this big laser gun point out. And that's when Captain Atom shows up, just being like, what are you trying to do here, Ted? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just saw on the news that you killed a bunch of innocent people. What is that about? And he's like, oh, I did that in the name of order, blah, blah, blah. And Tracy jumps in the middle being like, yo, you guys are friends. Let's act like it, okay? Like, you could work together and accomplish something great. And Ted's like, you're right. That's why I asked you here to begin with. I mean, I don't need you to do anything. I just kind of want your soft blessing of don't try to stop me. And Captain Atom's just like, yeah, all right, whatever. So he goes over and he flips a switch, and immediately a laser beam starts blasting at the dome. And as he looks up at it, seeing if it's shattered the dome, it didn't. And Ted's like, oh God, I'm a failure. I accomplished nothing. But then he turns to look at Captain Atom, and Captain Atom has his powers back. And he's like, oh my God, I've got my powers. This is crazy. Maybe you put like a hairline fracture or something in there. And Captain Atom says, all right, we need to investigate. We need to do something. So Ted goes to get his Blue Beetle armor, but Captain Atom stops him and says, actually, vigilantism is still illegal. He's like, bro, you're literally wearing a superhero costume. He's like, no, this is my uniform. So they look up in the sky and they see it's going all rainbow colored, which Captain Atom recognizes as an energy signature that belongs to one of their villains. So he flies off to go deal with it. And of course, Blue Beetle's like, I'm going to go get my suit anyway. So turns out Dr. Spectro is got his powers. Captain Atom immediately comes up and goes to fight him, and he's like, all right, tell me what's going on, Spectro. Why do you have your powers back? And he's like, I don't know. I just got him back, like just now. I have no idea what's happening here. And he says, not a clue, honest Injun. And Captain Atom goes, you know, that's offensive to the Indian people. And he's like, I kill people as a supervillain. You think I care? And then, this is where the book got crazy for me. All of a sudden, Booster Gold shows up. He teleports in out of nowhere, and he goes, where am I? And they're like, what the hell is this? And Spectre's like, once again, no idea. So Captain Atom blasts Booster Gold into a rooftop. Booster gets up, and he's like, hey, man, that wasn't cool. And then all of a sudden, he starts fading back out again. This is exactly what happens in the Future's End Booster Gold issue. This is a direct tie into that, which is insane to me. But regardless, as soon as Booster starts phasing out, Captain Atom and Spectro start losing their powers. Blue Beetle jumps around in his costume, manages to grab Captain Atom out of the air, and Atom's just like, oh, maybe you should have let me fall. Like, oh, have the power, and then losing it again is too much. And Blue Beetle's just like, hey, don't sweat it. Things are going to be okay. And then in the background, you see Spectro just hit the rooftop behind them with a thump. At that point, Vic Sage is showing up again, and they're like, oh God, please spare us the nihilistic crap for just like a minute here. And he's like, actually, no, maybe, you know, what we just saw was the powers were able to come back. Maybe we shouldn't be focusing on leaving. Maybe we should be focusing on bringing something in, because the powers came and went with that guy who showed up. And they're like, all right, that's a good strategy. And all of a sudden they feel the ground underneath them shaking, and Blue Beetle jumps off a building and hops onto the Beetle, and they're all like, how did you know that would be there? And he's like, I trusted it. Also, Tracy may have flown it over, but regardless, they look out and they see one of the buildings on the skyline is shape-shifting into the form of Telos, who then makes his announcement and says the domes are coming down. And everyone's like, that was very dramatic. And then as they jump into the Beetle, Captain Atom has once again turned back into his Captain Atom form. And they're like, okay, well, this is good, I guess. But, like, what do we do now? And then Blue Beetle points dramatically at the sky and says, everyone look! And we see the dome opening up and a dark green sky on the outside. According to the back of the book, they are going to be fighting an army of Legionnaires. I don't know specifically when or where that's going to be happening, but regardless, Legionnaires. Okay. First and foremost, I cannot believe I'm saying this. This book was written by Scott Lobdell. I really like the humor in this book. I cannot explain it. It has never worked for me before, and yet I am absolutely like laughing as this book goes on. The panel of Dr. Spectro just hitting the ground with a thump is just perfect for me. I don't know why. I love it. The art style also, it's very manga-esque, but it really does work here as well. It's got like just enough of a blend of Americanization that I really enjoy it. And then working in the fact that this somehow manages to tie into that Future's End Booster Gold thing, like I remember reading that and thinking, boy, Captain Atom sure looks weird, but then like it perfectly ties in here. Great. Like I don't know how else to say it. This is the only time that this feels like an actual tie-in with consequences, despite the fact that by definition this is not going to have any. Like this is having that little glimpse over to the Convergence or the Future's End tie-in is like just enough foresight and planning that it feels like this was all actually planned out to a meticulous degree. It probably wasn't, but like it feels that way, and I want to savor that. Beyond that, it's just funny in its own right. I like the way it looks. So no, I wholeheartedly approve of this issue. I think I'm going to go with a 9. Like, I cannot believe I'm going with a 9 on that, but like this is the only issue out of Convergence that like I think even if we weren't doing Convergence, this issue would just work wholeheartedly on its own. I'm interested in the dynamics of the team. I'm interested in all this other stuff going on. Kudos. Top tier. 9 out of 10. Convergence Booster Gold #1, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Alvaro Martinez. So full backstory you're going to need is Future's End Booster Gold #1, because this is a direct continuation follow-up to that. I can't believe it as I started reading it. But we open up in the future, District of Gotham, where we see Booster Gold stealing the time bubble to begin with. He's running down a hallway and they're firing off shots, but he's like, oh, you're not going to shoot me once I get closer to the SKS, they call it. So he runs in, he manages to use a contact lens to fool a retina scan to think he's a professor, and as he gets into a lab, he pushes away the one professor there, or assistant or whatever, hops into the time bubble, and apparently he was supposed to go back an hour ago in order to deliver the SKS to whoever it was that hired him, but they do actually end up taking fire at Booster as he's taking off, and it activates whatever that ends up sending him back like 500 years. So then we pick up with Booster still having a tube attached to the back of his head. At the end of the Future's End thing, Booster was blackmailed / threatened into giving up the information regarding the vanishing point to Brainiac, lest the other Booster from another timeline and that Booster's sister be killed. More importantly, the sister. So we see Booster wakes up to the sound of gunfire, and entering the room is Skeets, his little robot companion, and Rip Hunter, who he doesn't know who he is yet. Skeets introduced and says like, hey, yeah, this is Rip Hunter. He's helped out here. And Rip says, look, you, Booster Gold, are not the Booster Gold that I'm looking for. I'm looking for a different one from more of 2000s or whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, the other one, he was here, how do you know him? He's like, oh, he's my father. And Booster's like, I'm sorry, you're my kid? I'm gonna name my kid Rip? What, seriously? And he's like, not really, it's a thing, don't worry about it. Eventually they run out of this room and find out that they were actually being held on Skartaris, which is in the main Convergence book underneath the surface level of the planet Telos. And it's like, yep, this is Castle Deimos. He was the one who locked you up along with every other time traveler I could think of. And it's you know, he's not all the brains behind this, though. There's got to be something else bigger going on. So at that point, Rip says, yeah, I need to find whoever this is. Someone's looking for Vanishing Point. And that's where our Booster says, oh yeah, I gave up the info on that. And Rip's like, you did what? And he's like, yeah, no, I had to save the sister. Like, that was a whole thing. You know, I have compassion, unlike your booster. He was willing to let her die. So at that point, he's like, fine, whatever. We got to figure this out. So they go down into the basement of Castle Deimos because now everything's changed as to what they need to do. And they start talking about, like, the differences between the universes and whatnot. And Booster's like, yeah, came by way of the 25th and 21st centuries. You know, Superman and Wonder Woman, they're dating. And Rip is like, I'm sorry, Superman and Wonder Woman are dating. What in the hell is wrong with your universe, man? And Booster's like, what? Is that not normal? Is that not normal? Is my universe weird? And he's like, no. Your universe may be all that matters if my suspicions are correct. So they manage to get down to the basement and they come across a hall that's just got a menagerie of all the different time travelers from all of DC continuity. And Booster asks how Rip escaped torture and all that capture stuff, and he's like, oh, nobody knows where I'm from. I don't give that out at all. And Skeets is like, wow, if only someone else could be that forward thinking. And Booster's like, you're going to wake up one day in a trash compactor, I swear to God, Skeets. So the other Booster, pre-Flashpoint Booster, is like, hey, can you guys get us out of here? So Rip busts open the wall that's holding Booster and Michelle, the sister, and as they get out, Booster pre-crisis or pre-Flashpoint is hobbled over in pain. Like he's not looking good. And Rip's like, no, hey man, you're dying. Like you and I both know it. And Michelle's like, what are you saying? What's going on? And it turns out that pre-Flashpoint Booster did too much time traveling, absorbed too much chronal energy, and now he's just kind of zipping around a little bit, and it's killing him. Turns out that during the Future's End issue, when we thought he was bouncing around to different timelines, he was actually pretty much stuck on Telos because Telos has a lot of properties that are similar to Vanishing Point, but he was bouncing around different cities within Telos, which we then saw happen in the Blue Beetle tie-in that came out this same week. So yeah, they all had the chronal energy and whatnot, and at that point the other booster's like, okay, so is that going to happen to me as well? I've done time traveling. It's like, no, it needed to be like very frequent time travel. Don't worry about it. And Booster comments like, wait a minute, why are you two the same age roughly? And he's just like, time travel, clearly. We'll try to catch up here. So then the two boosters have a talk for a second, and he says like, hey, Rip was mentioning that you discovered along with him the multiverse. That seems like a pretty big deal. And he's like, yeah, I had a lot of trouble in my timeline, but eventually I made myself matter. I mattered. And other booster, New 52 booster, is like, I don't know if Superman's going to take my call, but if he is, we're going to get you help, man. And pre-Flashpoint booster's just like, Superman might not take your call? Why wouldn't he? Superman would definitely take my call. What kind of booster are you? And at that point, he all of a sudden shudders and disappears in a flash of chronal energy. So at that point, we see Deimos and a bunch of lizard men, along with some other henchmen, come in and start attacking the group because they escaped the menagerie. So immediately, Booster and Crow start fighting against these lizard people. Turns out Michelle has magnetism powers, so she just magnets out their weapons and uses it to attack them, and everyone makes their way up to the surface as best they can. As they get out to the surface of Telos, they see all the domed cities around, and they're like, yeah, it's a whole thing. He's doing things with different timelines. It's whatever. We need to figure out where pre-Flashpoint Booster's signal is coming from, though, because he is said they make the equivalent of saying that he's essentially a compass that lost track of what north and south is, and so he's just spinning wildly around. Apparently, Skeets is able to narrow down the signal to a metropolis that was from the 31st century, Superboy and the Legion, and so they fly over there. New 52 Booster gives the lowdown on, hey, here's how I ended up with my Skeets, because apparently my Skeets is better than the other Skeets that the pre-Flashpoint Booster had. He's a bit more knowledgeable. So they get over to the dome. Domes were built to keep things in, not keep things out, so it just easily gets inside, and as soon as they get in, they're looking around for the other booster, but people start swarming them like, you're not from here. We're very aware of people who have been in here. Who the hell are you? Are you the jailers? Are you coming to help? Like, what's going on here? And they're like, okay, we're drawing a bit too much attention. And as if on cue, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes show up, and they say like, all right, there may be more. If these people know something, we got to figure it out. So they start attacking the gang. Immediately, Michelle is told to go off and deal with finding pre-Flashpoint booster. New 52 boosters fighting against Superboy, and he's like, dude, why are you wearing your panties on the outside? And he's like, panties? And he just slams Booster down to the ground. At that point, we see pre-Flashpoint booster as Michelle approaches, but he gets chronal energied out again, and we don't see what happens with the rest of the gang, but Booster then gets teleported into a different dome. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on. And he crashes on a roof. I recognize that Daily Planet globe. That's my Daily Planet globe. That's the one from my Earth's metropolis. And a voice off from the side offers a hand and says, like, I've been telling you to lay off all the Chacos, Mikey. And he recognizes the voice and realizes it's Ted Cord, Blue Beetle. And he's like, Ted, you're alive? And he's like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? So, yeah, there's that. I don't know where this Ted is from. I don't think we've met another Blue Beetle on a different Earth. Maybe we did. Justice League International? Was that him? I don't know. Regardless, I mean, I am gobsmacked because it almost gives the illusion that this was planned out much better than it was. Like, I know that this one is a bit more of just like a continuation from the Future's End storyline, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Jurgens, having written for DC's for the better part of most readers' lives now, he was probably told to some extent what the larger plan was for Convergence down the road, or at least a broad outline, and he's like, okay, I can make that work with that Future's End tie-in, because of course he also wrote that. He's written everything Booster Gold forever. So no, I think that there is the outlines of a plan here that make this issue just a little bit more impressive and make it feel like there is a sense of continuity, rather than Convergence just being Earth 2 stuff is happening and also a bunch of tie-ins to other stuff. Like, this feels like it's actually more in mainline continuity than anything else. Mind you, the Future's End Booster Gold tie-in was also completely out of continuity, so it kind of loses points there. I'm going to say this is a 7.5. And I think that there is a chance that it could go up higher next issue. I really like the sort of like explanations and in-depth stuff they're going with. But the reason it's just a little bit lower than something else is that I don't really have as firm of a connection with Booster Gold and such. And I feel like it's kind of relying on that when it's getting the backstory of both Boosters and Rip Hunter and all this other stuff. So just it could have done a little bit more to get me attracted there, but 7.5 is still very, very respectable. Convergence Crime Syndicate #1, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Phil Winslade. So, Crime Syndicate, Earth 3, pre-crisis. I guess that the general of their planet was a morality flip, but we do get a little bit written here by Superwoman, aka Lois Lane, who is basically saying, yeah, reporters first call us Crime Syndicate, but like, we weren't evil, we were just kind of like thieves and stuff like that. Like, we were criminals, but we never really intended to hurt others. And apparently there was the death of a philanthropist named Bruno Mannheim, and that was an accident that really stuck with them, but like they didn't purposefully murder this guy, and yet they're still having to live that down more or less. And I say, yes, when the dome came down, Mannheim was just the first victim. It's only been a year, but it feels like forever. And we see Superwoman is writing this from a jail cell. She is on death row, and she's like, yep, everything changed. You look back, you wonder what your life could have been like if you made other choices. We see that the guards come up, they knock, and they say, hey, it's time, let's go. And she explains, yeah, one day it was Ultraman who said, hey, let's go to an alternate Earth. We'll test our metal against the heroes of that planet. And they came across the Justice League of Earth 0 or Prime or 1 or whatever it was at that point. And it kind of gave them some realizations of like, oh, wait, they're heroes because they choose to be, and we're just kind of cowards in a lot of ways. Oh, so then we cut over to Ultraman. I don't remember the rest. Empowering, Owlman, and I think it's Johnny Quick. And they are all outside of the prison getting ready to break in because they know Superwoman's execution is scheduled for the day and they have to go save it. And Johnny Quick's like, bro, why are we dressed up in our costumes? We don't have any powers. Like, what are we supposed to do here? And Owlman's like, I'm not going to let Lois die. And it's just like, okay, Jesus Christ, fine. So they've all got rifles, and they're just storming in. They're just like, we're going to save her, or we're going to die trying. Meanwhile, we cut over to the 853rd century metropolis, which is domed. Turns out the DC 1 million universe has been domed. And we meet up, and I don't know anything about the backstory for this one, but Batman is saying to Superman, put Owlwoman up on the wall. She deserves to be there. You do it. It's all your fault or whatever. And they're saying, oh, you know, the energy grid was important. We had to do something. I'm not going to get too much into detail on the 853rd, but apparently the city, while the Justice League here has been depowered, is run by a Luthor, aka Lincoln Luthor, and he's basically been running this crime thing, and Batman has not been taking it well because a bunch of people have died because of it. And so there's a bunch of goons running around, and it's like, all right, we have to do something, we have to take him out. And Superman's like, we're not killers. Justice League Alpha is not killers, just in Legion Alpha. And then all of a sudden there's an explosion. And it's like, oh God, they found us. Is everyone okay? But the Atom's been killed. He's taken a piece of shrapnel to the face. So it's like, oh God, we've got to go. The Luthorians are coming. But as they look around trying to figure out, like, all right, status check. Batman's already gone. Back over in Crime Syndicate world, they're hiding behind a guard tower. And it's like, okay, here's the plan. We run in and we try to grab her as fast as we can. And Johnny Quick's like, that's 800 feet, man. We ain't going to make it. 800 yards. Like, we're not going to make it. And he's like, okay, then follow-up plan. We get as far as we can, and then we start shooting everything else in sight. So they run in, they start doing it, but immediately they're hit by an ice beam. Turns out it's the Rogues, or as they're called in this universe, the Rogue Hunters. And it's just like, yeah, you know, Superwoman's a goner, and we're going to get the bounty on you guys. And unwilling to take that as a final answer, they run in guns blazing. We see, though, Superwoman is still being led to the chair despite all the gunfire from outside. And they're saying, like, oh, sit down, Miss Lane. She's saying, like, oh, please, no. And they put her in the chair. They put the little electric whatever on her head. And as Owlman is hit by an ice fist from Captain Cold, or whatever his name is here, he falls to the ground, says no. And then the lever is pulled. Superwoman Lois Lane is dead. Back to 853rd century, a bunch of Lex Luthor goons that all look just like him, dressed in his armor, are going down the halls trying to find the Justice Legion. And Batman is just up in the rafters watching them go by, and he's like, perfect. The real Lincoln Luthor would not pass up an opportunity to celebrate his triumph, so he must be close. And as Batman goes in trying to find him, he's immediately hit off to the side by Superman, who says, hey, I'm not going to let you do this. I'm not going to let you kill him. And Batman just knocks him to the ground because he doesn't have powers and says, let me. You think you can make your choices for me? I make my own choice. And he starts beating up Superman. We then see the Crime Syndicate has all been put into their own handcuffs, and the Rogue Hunters are like, yeah, all right, been a long time coming. And then Telos pops over the comms. Hey, everybody, Dome's coming down. You're all going to have to fight people, all right? And we see the 853rd century is also hearing this, and they're like, what the hell? We see that the Crime Syndicate realizes that they have their powers back, so they all break free of their chains, and they're like, all right, now you're going to pay for what you did to Lois. But before they can attack the Rogue Hunters, they get teleported out. Meanwhile, 853rd, Batman and Superman are like, okay, so we got our powers back, we should go fight Luthor, like, immediately. We can just take him out and take our city back. But Batman's like, I don't think we're going to get the chance. And then they get teleported out as well. And we see that they have all been teleported to just top side of Metropolis in the 853rd. So the rest of the group is all looking around, and this includes the rest of the Legion as well, not just Batman and Superman. Crime Syndicate's like, Johnny Quick and Power Ring get together, and he's just like, hey, yeah, we got our powers. That's great. And Power Ring's like, too late for Lois, though. And they just like mourn for a second. And Johnny Quick's like, so are we going to fight for our city? And we cut over to Owlman, who's like, this voice expects me to fight for a city that just killed the woman I love like 10 minutes ago. Screw that city. This is not my fight. And he just bails. He just dips into the shadows. Meanwhile, we go to Superman from 853rd, and he's like, all right, well, I refuse to cause the death of another city, even to defend our own. I'm sure that I can find the others, and we can come up with some sort of plan to get around this. And then he gets just whacked out of the sky by Ultraman, and he's just like, all right, 1 down, 4 to go. Let's go. And yeah, that's the issue. I'm not surprised Ultraman's causing problems. Clearly, that's his shtick. I don't have much attachment to either of these universes. I do think they did a better job of attaching me to the Crime Syndicate one by literally killing off one of them. It's a ballsy move, but good on them. They did it. The DC 1 million stuff, what very little I know of that universe does not appear here. So I don't know what's going on. It seems kind of just like a 90s universe all the same. I get it's futuristic, but it feels like 90s futuristic. So maybe we'll get a little bit more characterization there. I can understand a bit more of what's going on, but I'm not holding my breath. I'd say this one's probably just like a 6.5 for me. It's not doing a whole lot, but it's not awful either. Convergence, Plastic Man and the Freedom Fighters #1, written by Simon Oliver, art by John McCree. So this is Earth X, aka the Nazi Earth, where Nazis ended up winning the World War II, and we just continued on with freedom fighters trying to free America. We pick up with Plastic Man basically giving exactly what I just said there. Yep, Nazis won, and you know it's been a whole thing here, but wouldn't you know it, we're in media res, and it turns out that all the freedom fighters under the dome have been captured by the Nazis, and they are about to be put to death by hanging. And we see, as that's going on, the Statue of Liberty, because this is New York that's been captured on this planet, is covered in swastikas, and Plastic Man, who's narrating, is like, yeah, I bet you want to know about the dome. I'll get there. But let's rewind a little bit. Let's get back to the good stuff. So 1 year earlier, before the dome comes down, the Nazis have won, and they have, taken over America, quote unquote, but they have not managed to capture the hearts and minds of New York, of America. And so, during the day, there's graffiti, there's vandalism, there's whatever. But during the night, the freedom fighters come out and they actually take the fight to the Nazis. Meanwhile, over in Germany, there is, I guess Europe, I should say, there is a man called the Silver Ghost, who is fighting for the Nazis, and apparently he is super effective. He is gone by multiple names, and he does nothing but strike fear into the hearts of enemies. So the freedom fighters come up with a plan, and Plastic Man's basically saying something along the lines of, hey, let's get him to show up in New York. So we see that there is a Nazi commander named Herr Kommandant, who is just a pudgy, awful, horrible little man who's womanizing and a drunk and all that. And as he's throwing whiskey bottles, asking for more, we see that a plan is set into action where they infiltrate a supply run that's going into his house. And by the way, freedom fighters, you got Human Bomb, Doll Man, Plastic Man, yeah, Phantom Lady, Uncle Sam, and I think there's one more like Black Condor or something. So they're all coming in. They take out this truck. They manage to overcome it with their stuff, and they get into the castle. And we cut ahead showing a Nazi blimp flying over top of Times Square that has a naked air commandant duct taped onto the side. And they're like, yep, that'll be enough to get their attention. So We see a plane is coming into New York, and it has Silver Ghost on the side or inside of it. However, on the wing, human bomb lands, and he immediately just blows up the engine. So he's trying to crash the plane into the New York Bay. It ends up going farther into the city than they expect. So as Silver Ghost is about to hop out, Plastic Man comes up, and he's like, this is it. This is my chance, because I've always been trying to live down the identity of the thief I had as Eel O'Brien. I want to be more than that. And so I come up and I'm ready to fight him. However, just as we were fighting, just as the plane was going down, the dome closed. And I lost all of my plastic powers, and I allowed Silver Ghost to get away. And we see everyone else lost their powers as well. Everyone started panicking. They thought, oh God, what? The Nazis put a giant dome over us. However, once the Nazi plane started crashing into the sides, they're like, oh, okay. It wasn't the Nazis, so what's going on here? And we see the crazy people out in the street are holding up signs just saying, told you so. There's rioting, there's looting, everything's going crazy. It's the brink of destruction. And we see Silver Ghost. He's also lost his powers, whatever they may have been to begin with. Seems kind of electricity based. He's now just a regular member of the military, but he is highly effective. And whereas Air Commandant was very much a lackadaisical, like, failure of a man, we see that Silver Ghost comes in and he's like, we're going to let the city burn. And so they things get worse and worse and worse until finally the people are begging for somebody to take charge to be able to fix the city and restore order. And that's where the Nazis roll in with a show of force, and they restore order, and the people are essentially welcoming them in because of how bad things got there. And Plastic Man's like, I hate the fact that that happened. I hate the fact that I was so stupid to lure such a competent man into the city. And like, we could have been fine underneath the dome if it were just Air Commandant, but we can't possibly go up against him without our powers. And, you know, he also is angry at himself because with all of the horrific things that happen and how he has to be on the run, he's turned back to a life of crime. He's stealing from stores now. But what he's most angry about is that Uncle Sam is basically dying. He is completely catatonic. He hasn't moved in ages. The patriotism that kept him strong, it's just gone because people have embraced the Nazi ideology, or at least the occupation thereof. And Phantom Lady's just like, hey, look, Plastic Man, we know you're doing your best. And he's like, yeah, well, it's not what it used to be. So we see one night Eel's going out. He's trying to make a deal with some old criminal buddies, connections that he had to get some guns. And the criminals are just like, yeah, no, sounds good. But you know how it is nowadays. And apparently it was all just a setup. The Nazis come, they corner Eel, and they get the rest of the freedom fighters by connection. So that's where we cut to now. They were all in dungeon. They're being ready to be hung the next morning. And then, wouldn't you know it, the domes come down. Telos says, hey-o, time to fight. But not before the entire rest of the group get their powers back, and they just bust out, and they're like, all right, let's go kick some Nazi ass. But as they look up in the sky and they see all the things with the grids and the whatever, you're gonna have to fight and do whatever, we just get a single glimpse of next time the Earth X universe has to fight against the Future's End timeline and all the crazy ass robot cyborg combo things that were going on there. So that's a choice. I suppose there's some connections that can be made. I don't know how strong they're going to be. It feels like it's a good in concept sort of thing, where it's a horrible dystopian universe and then a horrible dystopian timeline. And it can work out, and it would also work for the idea of a freedom fighter. But, like, I don't know. I guess I want to see how it's going to turn out more. Just getting that single page tease of like, this is coming up, I don't feel like I'm given enough to say whether or not it feels like it's going to work. It also says it's a 3-way battle because Silver Ghost is going to have his stuff back as well. So yeah, I don't know. It can go 100 different directions. I'd say for this issue, I like the characterization of Eel, and I like the idea that he feels responsible for bringing this villain into the city before the dome came down. It's a good characterization to have, but everything else is kind of, I guess it's all right. It's just not great. So I'll say 6.5 and just call it there, with the full broad expectation that the next issue may just as easily be the same or could be far, far better. But 6.5 for this. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this April 29th, 2015. And just as a reminder, because again, I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick here at the end, if you were listening to this within the first, 5 days when it comes out, then this weekend is Free Comic Book Day. It will have nothing to do with the New 52, probably. I'd be shocked if it did, but go ahead down to your local comic shop, pick up some free comic books, because why not? They're free. What more could you possibly? It's a great way to start the collection or add to your already far too large collection. So, what is coming out next week? Well, Convergence is a cyclical event. We have finished all of the issue 1s. We are now moving into the issue 2s. So, first week was the Flashpoint / end of Crisis universe stuff happening there, and that's what we're coming back to this time. So we have Batgirl, Justice League, Nightwing and Oracle, Superman, The Question, Batman and Robin, Harley Quinn, Speed Force, The Atom, and Titans. All of those issue 2, and then of course we have the main series issue number 5. Beyond that, don't really have anything else going on. If you have enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a comment, blah, 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 all that stuff. We have a Discord, a subreddit, a Patreon. Go ahead and leave comments on all those. Look, if I'm going to be frank with you right now, it is about 1 in the morning. This episode needs to go out in about 12 hours. I have work in about 6 hours. And I just totally underestimated how long Multiversity would be to talk about and read and comprehend. So I am currently operating on about like 10% brain power. So let me see if I could just zoom through this ending real quick. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week and interact with this one in a positive fashion. I look forward to seeing whatever it is you have to say in the comments down beneath this video or on any of our other social media platforms. But like I said, be sure to tune in next time, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.